They found her coat on the bridge railing and called it a suicide. Adrian Voss read the headline on his phone and felt something cold move through him that had nothing to do with the November air. He knew what a setup looked like. He had built enough of them. The nurse in the photograph had steady eyes, the kind of eyes that belong to someone who fights, not someone who quits. He was already moving toward the river before he made the decision to go. If this story moved you, subscribe to our channel and follow Emma's story all the way to the end. Drop a comment and tell us what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story has traveled. Emma Whitmore had not slept in 31 hours. That was not unusual for her. She had gone longer. She had worked double shifts back-to-back during the flu surge 2 winters ago, had stayed on the floor for 40 straight hours during the incident with the chemical plant explosion that sent 60 people through the doors of Boston General all at once. Sleep was something Emma treated like a luxury she would get to, eventually, the way other people talked about vacations or retirement. But this was different. This time she was not awake because patients needed her. She was awake because her career was gone. She sat in the break room at 4 a.m. with a cold cup of coffee in her hands and the termination letter on the table in front of her. She had read it 11 times. She knew every word. She could close her eyes and recite the exact language they had used. Negligence resulting in patient harm conduct, unbecoming a licensed medical professional, evidence of controlled substance misappropriation, and every time she ran through those phrases, the same thing happened in her chest. Not anger. Not yet. Something quieter and more dangerous. Disbelief, because none of it was true. Emma set the coffee down carefully, the way she set down instruments during a procedure. Controlled. Deliberate. She had a habit of being careful with things, and she had never entirely decided whether that was a strength or a flaw. Emma. She looked up. Daniel Cho was standing in the doorway. He was one of the younger nurses on the overnight rotation, 24 years old, barely 18 months out of school. He had started on Emma's ward, and she had trained him personally. He was good, careful, and quick, and genuinely kind in the way that some people just are, without having to work at it. He looked like he had been crying. "You should go home," he said. "They're saying you can't be on the floor." "I know." "Emma." "Daniel." She said his name the way she said things when she needed people to stop. Not unkindly, just firmly. "I'm not on the floor. I'm in the break room. There's a difference." He crossed the room and sat down across from her, which was not what she had wanted, but she did not tell him to leave. "They found the medication in your locker," he said quietly. "I heard them talking." "I know what they found. You didn't put it there." It was not a question. He said it the way someone states a fact they have already decided is not up for debate, and Emma looked at him for a long moment before she answered. "No," she said. "I didn't." "Then who did?" She did not answer that, not because she did not have theories. She had theories. She had been turning them over in her mind for the past 6 hours with the same methodical attention she gave to patient charts and medication protocols, lining up the details and examining them from every angle. But theories were not evidence, and right now, all the evidence pointed at her. The medication that had disappeared from the controlled substances cabinet was fentanyl. 47 milligrams across 3 separate dates, drawn on legitimate orders and never documented as administered. The records showed Emma's badge as the authorized user. The records showed her signature on the withdrawal forms. She had not signed those forms. She was almost certain she had not signed those forms. The almost was the thing that was eating her alive because Emma was meticulous. She had always been meticulous. She documented everything double-checked, everything flagged discrepancies in other people's charting the way a proofreader flags misplaced commas. It was practically a nervous habit. So when she looked at those withdrawal records and saw her own handwriting, and could not immediately say with absolute certainty, "I did not write," that hesitation was the most frightening thing that had happened to her in 29 years. She had said as much to the hospital's compliance officer, a precise woman named Catherine Marsh, who wore small wire-rimmed glasses and had the expression of someone permanently disappointed in the people around her. "You're telling me you don't remember signing those withdrawal records," Catherine had said. "I'm telling you I don't believe I signed them, but I want to be accurate." That's an unusual response from someone claiming they're innocent. Emma had looked at her steadily. That's an accurate response from someone who takes the truth seriously. If I were going to lie to you, I would say I absolutely did not sign them. I'm telling you what I actually know. Catherine Marsh had written something down in her notepad and said nothing. That was the moment Emma understood how this was going to go. By 6 in the morning, the story was on the local news. She found out from her phone. 3 missed calls from her mother, 2 from former colleagues, 1 from a number she did not recognize. She opened the news app, and there was her hospital ID photograph next to a headline that made the coffee in her stomach turn to acid. Boston General Nurse suspended following patient death, medication theft alleged. Mrs. Dorothy Schaefer had died 2 nights ago in the cardiac unit. 73 years old, advanced congestive heart failure, admitted 4 days before her death. Comfortable and well managed through her final hours by a team that included Emma. The death had not been unexpected. The family had been present. Emma had sat with them afterward in the hallway and answered their questions gently, and driven home thinking about how peaceful Dorothy's breathing had been at the end. Now Dorothy's death was a headline. Now it was evidence. Emma read the article with her hands very still in her lap, and her face doing nothing at all, which was something she had gotten good at in the emergency department, where showing fear or uncertainty could undermine a patient's confidence at exactly the wrong moment. Sources within the hospital indicate that controlled substances were found missing from the ward, where nurse Emma Whitmore was on duty in the hours preceding the patient's death. Whitmore's nursing license has been temporarily suspended, pending investigation. Colleagues describe a nurse who had seemed erratic and under significant stress in recent weeks. Whitmore has not made a public statement. She set her phone face down on the table. She breathed. She thought about the word erratic. She thought about who might have said that, who had been watching her closely enough to characterize her behavior, who had been paying attention to Emma Whitmore for reasons that had nothing to do with admiring her work. Her mother called at 6:45. "I saw the news," Margaret Whitmore said. No preamble. That was where Emma had gotten the habit. "It's not true, Mom. I know it's not true. I'm not calling because I thought it might be true. I'm calling because I want to know if you're all right." Emma considered lying. It would have been easy. "I'm fine, Mom. Don't worry, I'll handle it." And her mother might have even believed it for a few hours. But Margaret Whitmore had a way of knowing when Emma was performing composure rather than actually possessing it, had been able to tell the difference since Emma was 7 years old and refused to cry when she fell off her bicycle and split her knee open on the driveway. "Not entirely," Emma said. "Are you at the hospital?" "Break room. Come home." "I can't come home yet. I need to think." "Emma, you can think here." "I need to think here." She paused. "I need to walk through what happened. I need to go over everything I remember. If I leave now, I'll feel like I'm running." Her mother was quiet for a moment. "You never could stand the feeling of running," Margaret said finally. "Not once in your entire life." "It got me in trouble a lot. It also made you the best nurse I've ever watched work." A pause. "Be careful, sweetheart." Emma did not ask what she meant. She was beginning to understand that careful might already be too late. She spent the next 4 hours going through everything she could access. Patient charts from the past 3 weeks. Medication logs. Her own schedule cross-referenced against the withdrawal dates on the records they were using against her. The camera logs from the nurse's station, or rather the absence of the camera logs, because when she submitted a formal records request at 7:15 in the morning, She was informed by the compliance office that the camera footage from the relevant dates was unavailable due to a technical malfunction. A technical malfunction. She wrote that down. She wrote down everything. The day shift supervisor, a woman named Patricia Ewan, who had been at Boston General for 19 years and had always treated Emma with professional respect and occasional warmth, appeared in the break room at 8:30 and sat down across from Emma with the expression of someone performing a duty they would rather avoid. Emma, you understand that with the suspension in place, you're not supposed to be accessing patient records. I'm not accessing patient records. I'm reviewing my own scheduling documentation. That's a fine line. Patricia. Emma looked at her directly. Someone planted evidence in my locker. Someone forged my signature on withdrawal records. I need to understand when it happened and how, and the only way to do that is to go through the timeline carefully. I'm not going to apologize for that. Patricia looked at her for a long moment. I believe you, she said quietly enough that it sounded like a confession. Emma felt something shift in her chest. Not relief exactly. Something more fragile than relief. Thank you, she said. That's not the same as being able to help you. The administration is under a lot of pressure. The Schaefer family. The Schaefer family lost their mother to advanced heart failure. That's a tragedy, but it's not negligence. She was in stage 4. Everyone knew she was in stage 4. I sat with them for 45 minutes after she passed, and they were not angry. They were grieving. That's different. Someone has gotten to them, Patricia said carefully. I don't know who, but they've filed a formal complaint. Emma stared at her. The family? I'm sorry. 2 days ago, the daughter held my hand and thanked me for making her mother comfortable. She said her mother hadn't been afraid. She said that mattered to her more than... Emma stopped. She started over. Someone got to them, she said. That's what I believe, yes. Then this isn't about a medication error. This isn't about me. This is something else. Patricia said nothing. She stood up, straightened her badge, and looked at Emma with the particular expression of someone who cannot say more than they already have. Go home, Emma, please. You can't fight this from the break room. She went home, not because she felt defeated, because she needed to think without being watched, and she had begun to understand that she was being watched carefully and deliberately in a way that had been going on much longer than the past 48 hours. Her apartment was on the 3rd floor of a building in Charlestown, small and orderly and full of books. She had lived there for 4 years. She knew every sound the building made, every neighbor by name, every quirk of the ancient radiators in winter. She had never felt unsafe there, until now. She locked the door, sat down at her kitchen table, and opened her notebook. She was the kind of person who thought better on paper. Always had been. Her mother used to joke that Emma had written lists before she could write letters, that she had handed her parents pages of elaborate scribbles from the time she was 4, completely convinced she was organizing the world. She wrote down everything she knew. Dorothy Schaefer's death. The timing of the withdrawal records, the forged signatures, the security camera malfunction. The speed at which the story had reached the media too fast, she realized now. Too fast and too complete. Someone had given the press a narrative before the investigation had even started. She wrote down the word someone and drew a circle around it. She stared at it for a long time. Her phone rang. Unknown number. She answered. Miss Whitmore? The voice was male, smooth, and utterly confident. The voice of someone who was accustomed to being the person in the room who controlled the outcome. My name is not important right now. What's important is that you understand something about your situation. Who are you? Someone who has been watching this unfold with considerable interest. The evidence against you is not going to go away on its own. The hospital is going to complete their investigation, and the result has already been decided. Do you understand what I'm telling you? Emma's hand tightened on the phone. I understand what you're claiming, she said. I don't know yet whether it's true. A pause. Then something that was not quite a laugh. You're interesting, the voice said. Most people in your position would be begging by now. I'm not most people. No, you're not. Another pause. Go to the river tonight. The old Harrington Pier near the North End. An elderly man has been trying to reach you. He says you took care of his wife last spring. He has information about what's been happening to you. Why would he call you instead of calling me directly? Because he's afraid. He has reason to be afraid. Will you go? Emma looked at her notebook, at the circle around the word someone. I'll think about it, she said. Don't think too long. Information has a way of disappearing. The call ended. She sat in the silence of her kitchen for a very long time. And she went. She knew in some part of her mind that she had been trying not to listen to that she should not go. She knew that going alone to an abandoned pier at night, in response to an anonymous phone call, was the kind of decision that in any other context she would call reckless and dangerous. She would have told a patient in crisis not to do it. She would have told her mother not to do it. But she was thinking about Mrs. Kowalski's husband, Harold, 78 years old. Bad knees, who had brought Emma coffee every morning during the week she had looked after his wife last April. She was thinking about the way his hands had shaken when Emma told him his wife was going to be all right. The relief on his face. If Harold Kowalski had seen something, knew something, was afraid to go to the police, she took her phone. She texted Daniel the address and the time and a single line. If you don't hear from me by midnight, call this in. She put on her jacket and walked out into the rain. Boston at night in November had a particular quality that Emma had always found strangely beautiful. The wet cobblestones reflecting headlights, the harbor smelling of salt and cold, the way the city contracted into itself after dark, like something gathering its strength. She was not thinking about beauty tonight. She walked the last 4 blocks to the pier without seeing another person. The streetlights were sparse this far from the main streets, and the rain had picked up since she left her apartment. Not a downpour, but a steady, penetrating cold rain that found its way through her collar and into her hair. The pier was old. She could see that even in the dark, the weathered planks, the peeling paint on the iron railings, the general atmosphere of something that had been used, and then abandoned, and then forgotten. She stepped onto the pier. Hello. Her voice came back to her in the wet air. Nothing. She walked further out. The river moved below her, heavy and black, barely visible, but audible, the sound of a great deal of cold water moving fast. Is anyone here? Still nothing. She pulled out her phone to call Daniel, and then someone stepped out of the dark behind her. She turned. She saw a man she did not recognize. Then a second one. Then she understood in that crystalline, horrible, too-late way that understanding sometimes arrives exactly what this was. You really came? The first man said. He sounded almost surprised. Who are you? Emma's voice was steady. She was good at keeping her voice steady. Doesn't matter. He took a step toward her. Victor said you were smart. Smart people usually know better than to be alone on a pier at midnight. Victor. She did not know that name. Not yet. She took a step back. The iron railing hit her in the small of her back. Wait, she said. The man reached out and pushed her, and the river took her. The cold was not what she expected. She had treated hypothermia patients. She knew what cold water did to the body, the shock to the cardiovascular system, the way the muscles seized, the rapid loss of core temperature that could kill a healthy adult in 20 minutes. She knew all of that in her head. Nothing about knowing it prepared her for the reality. The river hit her like a wall, and then swallowed her, and the cold was total and absolute, and removed every thought from her mind, except the oldest and most fundamental one surface. She fought her way up. Her jacket was soaked and heavy, and pulling her down, and she fought it, kicked against it, got her head above water for one gasping half-second before the current took her sideways and pushed her under again. She was a strong swimmer. She had grown up near the water, had spent summers at the Cape with her mother, had swum in open water her whole life. But that was in summer, in calm water, not in a November river running fast with the week's rain. She came up again, gasped, went under. She was beginning to understand that she was going to die. Not in an abstract way, not as a theoretical possibility, as a fact that was arriving at her with the same certainty as the cold. She fought anyway, because Emma Whitmore had never been able to stand the feeling of giving up. On the pier above her, the two men had already turned to leave. They did not see the black town car that had pulled up behind the building at the end of the pier. They did not see the door open. They did not see the man who stepped out, looked at the water, and went completely still for 1 second before he started running. Adrian Voss had not planned to come to this part of the waterfront tonight. He had been at a meeting 2 blocks away. A meeting that concerned a significant amount of money and a territorial dispute that had been festering for 3 months. And he had been leaving when one of his men, Nico, who had been with him for 11 years and had an instinct for information, the way some people have an instinct for weather, had mentioned the anonymous tip that had come through a channel Adrian monitored. Someone setting up the nurse tonight. Harrington Pier. Adrian had not known what nurse. He had not known what pier. He had told Nico to pull up everything on Harrington Pier, and then looked at his phone and seen the news headline about Emma Whitmore, and something in his chest had moved in a way that he did not have an immediate name for. He had told his driver to go to the river. Now he was at the railing of the pier looking down at the water, and he could see her, a pale shape in the black current, going under, coming up, going under again. And he did not think about his suit or his phone or the gun in his jacket or the very specific and significant number of reasons why a man in his position should not be jumping into the Charles River at 11:45 on a November night. He went over the railing. The cold hit him like it had hit her, total absolute, stealing the breath from his lungs. He had been in difficult situations before. He had been in situations where his life was genuinely at risk. He was not someone who panicked. He did not panic now. He oriented himself, found the current's direction, and swam. He was a stronger swimmer than she was. Bigger, with more muscle mass, and more body heat to lose before the cold took him down, and he had the advantage of having chosen this, of having entered the water prepared rather than being thrown. He found her on the 3rd stroke. His hand closed around her arm in the dark, and he felt her fight him, felt her swing at him actually. Her elbow connecting with his jaw hard enough to rattle his teeth. "Stop," he said, and got a mouthful of river water and said it again louder. "Stop, I've got you. Stop fighting." She stopped, not because she trusted him. He could feel the tension in her arm, the way her body was still coiled and ready to fight, even as the cold was taking away her ability to do it effectively. She stopped because she was smart enough to understand that she needed to stop. "Can you swim?" he said. "Yes." Barely above the sound of the water. "Then swim. Follow my direction." And she did. They got to the bank 14 meters downstream from where she had gone in. Adrian pulled himself out first, and then reached back and took both her arms and hauled her up onto the concrete embankment, and she came up gasping and coughing and still shaking with the particular violence of someone whose body has been pushed very close to its edge. He pulled off his jacket and put it around her shoulders. She looked at him. In 11 years of running what he ran, of meeting the people he met, of living the life he had built, and sometimes regretted and always accepted, Adrian Voss had looked into a great many faces in moments of extreme stress. He had never seen a face that looked at him the way Emma Whitmore's face looked at him. Not with gratitude, not with fear, not with the particular calculation of someone trying to figure out what he was and what he wanted. With pure, clear assessment. She was looking at him the way she would look at a patient, taking in information, cataloging it, trying to understand what she was dealing with. "Thank you," she said. Her teeth were chattering. She said it clearly anyway. "Who pushed you?" he said. "I don't know their names." "Did you see their faces?" "Yes." "Good." He was already looking past her up the embankment. "Can you walk?" "Yes." "Are you going to fight me if I try to help you?" A pause. Then something that was almost a breath of a laugh. "That depends on where you're taking me," she said. He looked at her. "Somewhere warm and safe," he said. "Those are the only 2 things I can promise you right now." She looked at him for another moment with those steady, taking measure eyes. "All right," she said. She stood up without help, and Adrian Voss, who had pulled her from the river without quite knowing why, felt something he had not felt in a very long time begin to move in the back of his mind, slow and quiet and entirely unwelcome. The beginning of understanding that this was not going to end at the riverbank. Nico met them on the street with a car and a blanket, and the expression of a man who had worked for Adrian long enough to be surprised by very little, but was managing to be surprised by this. He said nothing until Emma was in the back of the car with the blanket around her and the heater running, and then he looked at Adrian with one eyebrow raised in a question that did not require words. "Later," Adrian said. He got in the car. Emma was sitting very straight despite the shaking. She had her hands wrapped around her own elbows, and she was looking out the window at the street going past, and she said without turning, "I'm not going to a hospital. You might have hypothermia. I know what hypothermia looks like. I'm a nurse." A pause. "I'm cold and shaken, and I need dry clothes and 45 minutes to stop shaking. I don't have hypothermia yet. The hospital would be safer. The hospital suspended me this morning. The hospital released my name to the press before the investigation was complete." She turned and looked at him directly. "I'm not going to the hospital." He held her gaze. "Where then?" She looked away. "I don't have anywhere to go," she said. "My apartment isn't safe. I understood that before I went to the pier tonight, and I went anyway, which was—" She stopped. "That was a mistake in judgment I intend not to repeat." "You trusted that someone was in danger," Adrian said. "I trusted wrong. That's not the same thing as bad judgment. That's someone exploiting good judgment." She looked at him again. "Who are you?" she said. He considered the question in the way he considered most things, briefly efficiently arriving at the answer that served the situation. "Someone who knows a setup when he sees one," he said. "And someone who has been in this city long enough to know which names are attached to the kind of operation that just tried to kill you." A long pause. "Victor," she said. He went still. "Where did you hear that name?" "The man on the pier. He said it. He said—" She paused, reconstructing it exactly, and he noticed that even half frozen and still shaking, she was precise about it. "Victor said you were smart." Adrian was quiet for 3 seconds. "Victor Harrington," he said. "You know him." "I know of him. Everyone in Boston at a certain level knows of him." He looked at her. "He is a very powerful man who has never once in his life gotten his own hands dirty. He pays other people to handle things and makes certain there is no visible connection. He is also patient, methodical, the kind of person who destroys someone's credibility before he moves against them directly." Emma was very still. "He destroyed my credibility," she said quietly. "Yes." "Before tonight?" "Yes." She turned back to the window. "Why?" she said. Not asking him specifically. Asking the dark street the question that had been sitting in her chest all day. "That," Adrian said, "is what I intend to find out." She turned back to him, and something had shifted in her expression. Not trust exactly, not yet, but the beginning of something else. The look of someone who has recalculated. "You jumped into the river after a stranger?" she said. "Yes." "Why?" He thought about telling her. He thought about the headline he had read, and the eyes in the photograph, and the thing that had moved in his chest when he stood at the railing of the pier and looked down and saw someone fighting to stay alive in the black water. He thought about telling her all of that. "Because you were in the water and I was on the pier," he said. It was not the whole answer, but it was the truest part of it. Emma Whitmore looked at him for a long moment in the moving car with the city lights going past outside and the heater running, and Nico navigating through the late-night streets with the quiet expertise of someone who had been navigating through things on Adrian's behalf for a long time. Then she said, "All right, I'll accept that answer for now." She pulled the blanket tighter around her shoulders. She looked back out the window. And Adrian Voss, who had built an empire on knowing when a situation was going to cost him more than he had planned for, understood very clearly that the night the river had tried to take Emma Whitmore had started something that neither of them had chosen, and neither of them was going to be able to walk away from easily. He was not sure yet whether that frightened him. He was not sure yet whether it should. The safe house was on the 4th floor of a building in the South End that looked from the outside like every other converted brick building on the block. Inside, it was something else entirely, not lavish. Not the kind of place that announced money, but the kind of place that had been designed by someone who understood the difference between luxury and function, and had chosen function every time. Emma noticed things the way she always noticed things, automatically cataloging detail without deciding to. Good locks on the door. Solid construction. A kitchen stocked with the basics. A first aid kit in the bathroom that was better equipped than most urgent care facilities she had worked in. She changed into dry clothes that Nico produced from somewhere without being asked, women's clothes in approximately her size, which told her something about the operation she had landed in the middle of that she decided to think about later. She came out of the bathroom to find Adrian Voss sitting at the kitchen table, with his phone in his hand and his wet shirt replaced by a dry one, and 2 cups of coffee on the table that he had apparently made while she was changing. She sat down across from him. "Tell me everything," he said. So she did. She was precise about it, chronological. She told him about the medication withdrawals and the dates and the records she had reviewed. She told him about the security camera malfunction. She told him about Catherine Marsh and the compliance investigation and the speed at which the story had reached the press. She told him about Patricia Ewan saying the Schaefer family had filed a complaint 2 days after Dorothy's daughter had held Emma's hand in the hallway. She told him about the anonymous phone call and the voice on the line and the single name it had given her. Harrington Pier, Adrian said, named after his family. She watched his face. That's not a coincidence. No. He set up the pier call. He told his men to use the pier. He wanted me to know whose name was attached to the place I was going to disappear. Adrian looked at her. That's either arrogance, he said, or a message. What kind of message? The kind powerful people send when they want someone to know they lost, when they want the last thing you understand before you go under to be the name of the person who put you there. He set his phone down. Victor Harrington has done this before. Not the river, but the dismantling. The slow destruction of a person's reputation before they're removed from the picture. It's a signature. You know his signatures. I know a great deal about Victor Harrington. Emma wrapped both hands around the coffee cup. It was hot, and she was still not entirely warm, and the heat through the ceramic was the most comforting thing she had felt in the past 24 hours. Then tell me, she said. Victor Harrington is 63 years old. He inherited his first 30 million and turned it into 300 through commercial real estate development. He is well-connected, well-liked in certain circles, and has never once been charged with a crime, despite having been adjacent to several situations that ended badly for people who stood in his way. Adrian paused. He sits on the boards of 2 hospitals, including Boston General. The coffee cup stopped halfway to Emma's mouth. He's on the board, she said. He has been for 4 years. She put the cup down slowly. He had access, she said, to records, to the compliance process. He could have put people in place. He could have arranged the investigation to go in a specific direction. Yes. How long has he been watching me? That, Adrian said, is the question. Emma was quiet. She was running it through her mind the way she ran difficult diagnoses, not grasping for the answer, but letting the evidence assemble itself into a picture. He wasn't watching me, she said slowly. He was watching the clinic. Adrian was very still. What clinic? My mother's clinic. Emma looked at him. In Dorchester. My mother has run a community health clinic out of a building she owns on Beaumont Street for 22 years. She started it when I was 7 years old after my father died, and she finished her nursing degree. It's a small building. It's not worth much as a building, but the land underneath it is worth a great deal, because it's one of the last undeveloped parcels in a neighborhood that has been gentrifying for a decade. She paused. There have been offers, 3 in the past 2 years. My mother turned all of them down. Who made the offers? Development companies, shell corporations. She never knew who was behind them. Emma stopped. Harrington. Almost certainly. He's trying to acquire the land. And your mother won't sell. She'll never sell. The clinic serves families that can't afford care anywhere else. That building she's spent her whole life in that building. She will not sell it. Emma's voice was absolutely flat and absolutely certain. So he decided that if he couldn't buy her out, he'd destroy the thing she loves most. You, Adrian said. Me. The word landed in the room and sat there. Emma picked up the coffee cup again. Her hands were steady. Adrian noticed that had been noticing it, in fact, for the past hour. The steadiness, the way she processed things. She had been thrown into a river at midnight, and she was sitting at his kitchen table, working through the logic of her own destruction with the same focused attention she probably gave to a patient who was coding. "You're not afraid," he said. She looked at him. "I'm terrified," she said. "I'm just not going to let that be the loudest thing in the room." Nico came in at 1 in the morning with a folder and a look that meant he had been busy. He set the folder on the table in front of Adrian and looked at Emma once with the careful assessing expression of someone who had learned over a long career to take measure of people quickly. Whatever he decided, he seemed to come down on a side he was willing to accept, because he pulled out the chair to Adrian's right and sat down without being asked. "Harrington has 3 development projects pending in Dorchester," Nico said. 2 residential towers and a mixed-use commercial block. All 3 are contingent on acquiring the remaining parcels in the target footprint. The Beaumont Street property is the last one. He opened the folder. He's been trying to acquire it for 14 months. The owner, Margaret Whitmore, has refused every approach. Emma's hands tightened around the coffee cup. "My mother," she said quietly. Nico glanced at her. 3 months ago, Harrington brought on a new board member at Boston General. A compliance consultant named Reeves who specializes in medical licensing disputes. He paused. 4 weeks after Reeves joined the board, the first medication withdrawal discrepancy appeared in the controlled substances log. "They built the case against me over 4 weeks," Emma said. "At least. Possibly longer. Building it slowly, carefully. The signatures on the withdrawal records. We'll need to look at those more closely. But if they were forged by someone who had access to Emma's signature on legitimate documents and enough time and skill to replicate it convincingly." Emma said, "My personnel file." Both men looked at her. "My personnel file at Boston General. It contains signed documents going back 6 years, performance reviews, acknowledgement forms. Everything I've signed since I started there." She looked at Adrian. "Harrington has board access. His people have access. They had everything they needed to practice." Nico wrote something down. Adrian was looking at Emma. "You realize what this means," he said. "That it was planned, methodical, that they've been building this for months, and they have people inside the hospital, and the licensing board, and possibly the media." She set down the coffee cup. "Yes, I realize what that means. It means you cannot go to the police tonight. I know. It means the standard systems for protecting someone in your situation are compromised. I know. It means I'm sitting here with a mafia boss at 1 in the morning because someone threw me into the Charles River, and you are currently the only person who has both the information and the inclination to help me." She looked at him directly. "I know exactly where I am, Mr. Voss. I'm not confused about it." A pause. "You know who I am," he said. "I've lived in Boston for 6 years. Everyone knows who you are." She held his gaze without flinching. "I also know that you jumped into a freezing river after a stranger without stopping to ask whether it was good for your business. So I'm choosing to take that at face value until I have a reason not to." Nico made a sound that from someone with less discipline might have been a laugh. Adrian ignored him. "What do you need?" he said. Emma thought about it for exactly 3 seconds. "The names of the men on the pier. Whatever financial records connect Harrington to the hospital board manipulation. The name of the compliance consultant Reeves and everything connected to him. And I need to know if my mother is safe tonight." "The last one I can do right now," Adrian said. He looked at Nico. Nico was already on his phone. Margaret Whitmore was safe. Nico had people check the building within 20 minutes quietly and without disturbing anyone, and the report came back clean. Emma accepted this information with visible relief that she did not try to hide, which Adrian noticed because it was the first crack he had seen in her composure. She cared about her mother with the particular ferocity of someone who has always known exactly what they would be willing to lose everything to protect. He understood that kind of caring. He had felt it once a long time ago about very different things. He understood the weight of it. "She can't know what happened tonight," Emma said. "She'll find out eventually. Not tonight. Tonight she needs to sleep." Emma looked at the table. "She worries about me. She's always worried about me. Not because she thinks I'm fragile. I'm not fragile, but because I walk toward things that scare other people away, and she's been watching me do that since I was 9 years old and got between two older kids who were herding a cat in the alley behind our building." "What happened?" Nico said. Emma looked up. "I got punched in the face," she said. "But the cat was fine." This time Nico did laugh, and even Adrian felt something move in his chest that was close to it. Emma did not smile, but she looked slightly less like she was holding herself together by sheer discipline. "There's something else," she said. She looked at Adrian. "The anonymous call I got this afternoon. The voice that told me to go to the pier." "What about it?" "It wasn't one of Harrington's men. The tone was wrong. Harrington's people, the men on the pier, they were hired. They had the energy of people doing a job. The voice on the call was different, smoother, more controlled." She paused. "I think someone told me to go to the pier knowing it was a trap." Adrian looked at her. "Repeat that." "I think someone wanted me at the pier tonight, not to help me, not to hurt me, to put me in a position where I would either be killed by Harrington's people or be forced to need help." She looked at him steadily. "I think someone wanted you to find me." The room was very quiet. Nico had gone completely still. "You're saying it was staged," Adrian said. "I'm saying the pieces don't connect unless someone with knowledge of both situations, what Harrington was planning and what I needed, set this up. Someone who knew I would go to the pier because I can't turn away from someone who needs help. And someone who knew you would be in that area tonight and that you would react if you saw someone in the water." Adrian was quiet for a long moment. "My meeting tonight," he said slowly. "The one 2 blocks from the pier. It was arranged 3 days ago by an intermediary I've used before, a man named Costello. Do you trust Costello?" "I trust him professionally." "That's not the same as trusting him." He looked at her. "No," he said. "It's not. Someone manipulated both of us tonight," Emma said. "Someone used me as bait to get you involved and used your predictable response to human suffering to get you to the river at exactly the right moment." She paused. "The question is whether that someone is working against us or for us." It was not a question Adrian had expected to be asking at 2 in the morning in a safe house in the South End. He had also not expected to be asking it with a suspended nurse who had been thrown into the Charles River 3 hours ago and was still thinking with absolute clarity. "Get some sleep," he said. "The second bedroom is yours. There are locks on the door." Emma stood up. "I'm not worried about the locks," she said. "I know. I'm telling you anyway." She picked up the coffee cup, drank the last of it, and set it in the sink. She paused at the door. "Mr. Voss." "Adrian." A brief pause. "Adrian," she said at once, testing the weight of it. "Thank you. For the river. And for this." She gestured at the room, at all of it, the coffee and the information, and the 2 men who had just spent an hour treating her situation like it mattered. "Get some sleep," he said again. She left. Nico waited until the door of the second bedroom had closed, and then he looked at Adrian with the expression he usually reserved for situations that were about to become significantly more complicated than initially projected. "She's going to be a problem," Nico said. "She's going to be a problem for Victor Harrington," Adrian said. "That's different." "Is it?" Adrian did not answer that. He looked at the closed door for a moment, then back at his phone where 3 messages had come in during the past hour from people who needed his attention and decisions and authority. He answered all three efficiently, in the clipped and precise way he handled everything, and then he sat for a while in the quiet kitchen, thinking about a woman who had been thrown into a river and come out the other side, still asking the right questions. She was awake before he was. He came out at 6 in the morning to find her sitting at the kitchen table again, this time with her notebook. She had apparently retrieved it from her jacket the night before, and it was slightly warped from the water, but functional, and a pen. And the expression of someone who had either slept very little or was simply the kind of person who hit the ground running. "You slept," he said. It was not quite a question. 3 hours. It was enough. She looked up. "I need to go to the hospital." "Emma, not to work, not to fight anyone. I need to get into the medical records system and pull the original documentation from the dates when the withdrawal records show my signature. The timestamps on electronic records are traceable. If someone forged my entries, the metadata will show the terminal they used the time the login credentials." She paused. "I still have my access credentials. The suspension is pending investigation, which means they haven't disabled my system access yet. That's a window that closes the moment they notice you've used it. Which is why I need to do it this morning." She looked at him steadily. "I'm not asking for permission. I'm telling you my plan because I think you might be able to help with the part that comes after." "What part is that?" "The part where I have digital evidence of forgery, and I need someone to ensure it reaches people who can't be pressured to make it disappear." Adrian sat down. He looked at her. "You worked that out before 6 in the morning," he said. "I worked it out around 4. Then I thought about the parts that could go wrong for about an hour, and then I went back to sleep because worrying about what could go wrong is less useful than sleeping and being sharp for the parts I can control." She capped her pen. "Are you going to help me?" "Yes," he said. "Good." She stood up. "I need coffee first." They went separately to the hospital. Adrian's idea, and a good one, a man, matching his description, walking into Boston General alongside a suspended nurse, was not a picture that helped either of them. He had people inside the hospital. Not employees, nothing that direct, but people adjacent to the hospital's administrative functions, who had over the years developed relationships with Adrian's organization that were mutually beneficial and entirely deniable. Emma went in through the staff entrance using her badge, which still worked, which meant the window was open. She moved fast, and she moved like she belonged there, because she did belong there. Had belonged there for 6 years, knew every corridor and stairwell and the particular rhythms of the morning shift change, knew who would be at which station and when, and which hallways would be quiet. She got to the records terminal in the third-floor nursing documentation room at 7:22, sat down, logged in, and started pulling files. She worked quickly and silently. She pulled the withdrawal records, the time-stamped logs, the terminal identification data, the login records for every access to the controlled substances, documentation in the relevant date range. She copied everything to an encrypted drive she had brought with her, a habit from years of backing up patient documentation during system migrations, a habit she was profoundly grateful for now. She found what she was looking for in 11 minutes. The forged entries had been made from a terminal in the hospital's administrative wing, not the nursing floor. The administrative wing, the executive level where the board offices were, where people like the compliance consultant named Reeves had access. The login credentials used were hers. But the terminal was not one she had ever used in 6 years of employment. She photographed the screen with her phone, copied the metadata to the drive, documented everything with the precision of someone who had been trained to create records that would hold up to scrutiny. Then she logged out. Then she stood up. Then Catherine Marsh walked in. The compliance officer stopped in the doorway. For a moment, neither of them moved. Emma looked at her. Catherine Marsh looked at Emma with the expression of someone recalculating rapidly. "You shouldn't be here," Catherine said. "No," Emma agreed. "But I am. You've accessed the record system." "I have." "That's a serious violation of—" "I found the terminal." Emma's voice was level. "The terminal that was used to make the fraudulent entries under my credentials. Administrative wing, executive floor. third-party login from an authenticated credential. She held up the drive. Time-stamped, documented. The login originated from a machine that I have never once in 6 years of employment at this hospital had cause to sit down at. Catherine was very still. That's, she started. Proof, Emma said. Or the beginning of it. She took a step toward the door toward Catherine. I am going to walk out of this hospital now. If you call security, I will have no choice but to deliver what's on this drive to every media contact I can reach before they get to me. If you let me walk out, I will give you 48 hours to do what your actual job requires you to do. She paused. You told me you believe me, Catherine. Show me what that's worth. Catherine Marsh stood in the doorway for 4 seconds. Then she stepped aside. Emma walked out. She was 2 blocks from the hospital when her phone rang. She answered without checking the number. That was well done, said a voice she did not recognize. She stopped walking. Who is this? Someone who has been watching you for longer than last night. A pause. You found the terminal records. That's further than I expected you to get on your own. I'm not on my own. No, you've made an interesting ally. The voice was measured, older, male. Emma, the people who want you destroyed are not going to stop because you found a piece of evidence. Harrington has very good lawyers and very good accountants, and he has had a great deal of practice making inconvenient facts disappear. Why are you calling me? Because what you found this morning is useful, but it's not enough. Alone, it's a piece of data that his lawyers will dismantle in a courtroom in 2 hours. You need something they can't dismantle. A pause. You need the financial connection, the payments between Harrington's development companies and the compliance consultant Reeves, the communications that authorized the board-level manipulation, the money trail. Emma was standing very still on a sidewalk in the November cold. You have that, she said. I have some of it. Who are you? The voice paused. Someone who is also interested in Victor Harrington's downfall, it said. For reasons that have nothing to do with you, but which align with your interests at this particular moment. That is not an answer. No. But it's all I'm going to give you right now. Another pause. There's a coffee shop called Meridian on Commonwealth Avenue. Be there at noon. Come alone. The call ended. Emma stood on the sidewalk with her phone in her hand and the encrypted drive in her pocket, and the particular feeling of someone standing at the center of something far larger than they had understood it to be. She called Adrian. He answered on the first ring. I found the terminal data, she said, and then I got a call. Tell me. She told him. Silence. You're not going to that meeting alone, he said. The caller said to come alone. I heard what the caller said. Adrian. Someone has been orchestrating this since before last night. Someone arranged for you to be at that pier. Someone arranged for me to be nearby. Someone is now offering you financial documentation connecting Harrington to the conspiracy. His voice was quiet and very controlled. Someone is managing this situation, Emma. And I am not putting you in another room with an unknown party without being close enough to do something about it if it goes wrong. Emma was quiet for a moment. You won't come inside, she said. It was not a question. She was problem-solving. No. You'll be outside. Yes. Far enough that the caller won't know. Yes. She thought about it. Okay, she said. Are you all right? She considered the question. She was standing on a public sidewalk in the cold, with damp hair and borrowed clothes, and an encrypted drive in her pocket, and a meeting at noon with an anonymous caller and a man she had known for approximately 8 hours who was apparently prepared to be her backup. I'm functioning, she said. That wasn't the question. A pause. I'm frightened, she said. Precisely and without apology, the way she said all true things. I'm frightened for my mother, and I'm angry about what they did to Dorothy Schaefer's family, and I'm angry about what they did to my career, and I'm sitting inside something I don't fully understand yet, and that scares me. A beat. But I've been scared before. It doesn't stop me from working. A silence on the line. I know, Adrian said. "See you at noon," she said. The coffee shop on Commonwealth was busy enough at noon to provide cover and quiet enough that voices did not carry across tables, which was probably why it had been chosen. Emma arrived 5 minutes early and chose a table with sightlines to both entrances. The man who sat down across from her at noon exactly was 60 years old and had the kind of face that had once been handsome and had settled into something sharper and more interesting with age. He wore a coat that cost more than Emma's monthly rent, and he set a manila envelope on the table between them before he sat all the way down. "You're punctual," he said. "I'm always punctual." Emma looked at him. "Who are you?" "My name is Charles Drummond." He folded his hands on the table. "I was Victor Harrington's business partner for 12 years, until 4 years ago when he did to me what he is now doing to you." Emma looked at him steadily. "He destroyed your reputation," she said. "He did considerably more than that. He manufactured evidence of financial fraud, had me investigated by the SEC, cost me my career, my marriage, and 3 years of my life." Drummond's voice was controlled, precise, the voice of a man who had processed his anger into something harder and more useful. The case was eventually dropped. Not enough evidence to prosecute, but the damage was done. "And you've been gathering information on him ever since." "I have." He pushed the envelope toward her. "That contains bank records, wire transfer documentation, and internal communications between Harrington's office and the consulting firm that employs Reeves. It shows the money flowing from a Harrington subsidiary to Reeves's firm beginning 18 months ago, with payment spikes corresponding to specific actions against you, the forged records, the media briefing, the approach to the Schaefer family." Emma did not touch the envelope yet. "Why now?" she said. "You've had this for how long?" Drummond looked at her. "Long enough. But evidence without a credible victim is a man with a grudge telling a story. You are a credible victim, Miss Whitmore. You are a nurse with a spotless record and a documented history of service who was systematically destroyed and then physically attacked. You are exactly the kind of person whose story cannot be dismissed." He paused. "I have been waiting for Harrington to overreach in a way that created someone like you." Emma sat with that for a moment. "You used me," she said. "I gave you the information that got you to the pier." "You used me," she said again, not louder, not harder, but with the particular weight of someone who has decided not to let that statement pass. Drummond had the grace to hold her gaze. "Yes," he said. "I calculated that Harrington would move against you physically once the reputational damage was done, and I calculated that having you survive that move visibly with a witness would be the most effective way to bring this to light." He paused. "I didn't know you would be thrown into the river. I expected something less." "Less what?" Emma said quietly. Drummond stopped. "I'm sorry," he said. "For the river. That was beyond what I had modeled." "People rarely model correctly for how bad things can get," Emma said. "I know that. I see it in the emergency department constantly. People underestimate how far things will go." She looked at the envelope. "Is this real?" "Every page of it. If I take this to the right people, it ends Harrington. The development projects, the board positions, the connections he's spent 30 years building. All of it." Drummond looked at her. "It also gives your mother's clinic the kind of public protection that makes it untouchable. No developer will touch a property that's become the symbol of what Harrington tried to do." Emma reached out and took the envelope. She held it in both hands. She thought about her mother in the clinic on Beaumont Street, 22 years of early mornings and late nights, and families who had nowhere else to go. She thought about Dorothy Schaefer's daughter holding her hand in a hallway. She thought about Daniel Cho's face in the break room that morning, trying not to cry. She thought about a man jumping into a freezing river after a stranger. "This isn't over," she said. "No," Drummond said. "This is where it starts." She put the envelope in her bag. She stood up. "Mr. Drummond," she said, "if anything in this envelope is fabricated, or if you have used me in any way that I discover was designed to hurt people I care about, I will make certain that whatever you have planned for Victor Harrington comes down on both of you." She looked at him with the direct and steady gaze that had made Catherine Marsh step aside in a hospital corridor that morning. "I'm not a tool. I'm the person who decides what happens next." Drummond looked at her. "Yes," he said, and for the first time in their conversation, something that sounded like genuine respect moved through his voice. "I'm beginning to understand that." Emma walked out of the coffee shop into the cold November air. Adrian was standing near a car across the street. He read her face when she crossed to him the way he had been reading people's faces for 20 years, and what he read stopped him from asking the obvious questions. "Good or bad?" he said. She handed him the envelope. "Neither," she said. "Real." He opened it, read the first page, looked up. "Drummond," he said. "You know him." "I know of him. He's been trying to go after Harrington for years through channels that kept not working." Adrian looked at her. "He found his channel." "He found me, you mean?" "Yes." Emma looked at the envelope in his hands. "He's right about one thing," she said. "This is enough to end it. If we get it to the right people in the right way without giving Harrington the chance to bury it." She paused. "That's the part I don't know how to do alone." Adrian looked at her for a long moment. "I do," he said. She looked at him. She had known this man for less than 12 hours. She had been thrown into a river and pulled out and fed coffee and helped by someone whose name people said in lowered voices, whose reputation was built on a kind of power she had spent her entire career working against. She had no reason to trust him beyond the fact that he had jumped into a freezing river without hesitation and had not once in 12 hours attempted to use her situation to extract anything from her. "Okay," she said. "Okay. That's what I said." She straightened her bag on her shoulder. "What do we need?" Adrian tucked the envelope inside his coat. "Time," he said, "and the right person to receive this in a way that can't be undone." Emma looked at the street at the city she had lived in for 6 years and loved in the specific way of someone who had chosen it deliberately rather than ended up in it by accident. "Then let's not waste any," she said. She started walking. After a moment, Adrian fell into step beside her. Neither of them said anything else. They did not need to. The envelope sat on the table between them like something that had been waiting a long time to be opened all the way. Adrian had spread the documents across the surface in the safe house. Kitchen bank records, wire transfers. Internal communications printed on letterhead that carried the name of 3 different shell companies that all traced back, if you followed the paper carefully enough, to a holding entity called Harrington Capital Partners. Nico sat to Adrian's left with a laptop and the expression of a man who had spent the better part of his career following paper trails and had learned to read the shape of a conspiracy the way other people read maps. Emma sat across from both of them and did not touch the documents. She had been staring at one page in particular for the past 4 minutes without saying anything, and Adrian had learned enough about her in the past 14 hours to know that when Emma Whitmore went quiet, it was not because she had run out of things to say. It was because she was working something out and she was not going to speak until she had it. He waited. "The first payment," she said. 18 months ago, the wire from Harrington Capital to Reeves's consulting firm." She looked up. "What was happening 18 months ago at the clinic?" Nico pulled it up. He had already searched the property records while Emma was walking back from the coffee shop because Nico anticipated what would be needed next approximately 60% of the time. And that percentage was the reason Adrian had kept him for 11 years. Harrington Capital submitted a development proposal to the city of Boston for the Dorchester Corridor, Nico said. The proposal was contingent on acquiring 7 properties. 6 were already under contract. The 7th, Beaumont Street, Emma said. The clinic filed an official objection to the development proposal 18 months ago. Margaret Whitmore submitted testimony to the City Planning Board arguing that the corridor development would displace approximately 400 families who depended on the clinic for primary care. Nico paused. She won. The Planning Board ruled in her favor. The proposal was sent back for revision. Emma was very still. My mother beat him, she said quietly, publicly, in front of the planning board. She testified for 40 minutes apparently, and the board chair called her statement the most compelling community impact argument he had heard in his tenure. Nico looked at Emma. Harrington was in that room. A silence. So the payments to Reeves started the following week, Emma said. 4 days after the ruling. Emma sat back. She looked at the ceiling for a moment, with the expression of someone absorbing a blow they had been half expecting and had still not entirely prepared for. He sat in that room, she said, and listened to my mother talk about 400 families who needed that clinic, and his response was to start building a case to destroy me. She paused. Not her. Me. You were the softer target, Adrian said. Your mother is a community figure. Going after her directly would have generated resistance. Going after you, a nurse who could be painted as negligent, unstable, removes the thing she values most without making her a martyr. And once I was destroyed, she'd have nothing left to fight for. Emma's voice was precise and entirely flat. He was going to take away the reason she gets up in the morning. The grief of watching me go down was supposed to be what broke her. Yes, Adrian said. She was quiet for another moment. Then she said, he picked the wrong family. There was something in her voice when she said it. Not heat, not anger in the way anger usually sounds. Something older and more dangerous than that. The voice of someone who had decided something. Emma, Adrian said carefully, I'm not going to do anything reckless, she said, reading him without looking at him. I'm stating a fact. He looked at my mother and decided she was someone whose grief he could weaponize, and he was wrong about that, and he was wrong about me. She looked at the documents. So let's figure out how wrong. They worked through the afternoon. Nico traced the corporate structure of the shell companies with the methodical efficiency of someone disassembling a very complicated machine, one component at a time. Each holding entity connected to the next through board members and registered agents and legal addresses, a maze designed specifically to ensure that anyone who followed the trail would run out of rope before they reached the center. But the wire transfer records were cleaner than Harrington had intended. Money had a quality that human testimony did not. It was specific, it was time-stamped, and it did not change its story under pressure. The transfers from Harrington Capital to the consulting firm that employed Reeves totaled $470,000 over 18 months. The payment schedule aligned with documented events, the forged withdrawal records, the leak to the media, the approach to the Schaefer family, the anonymous setup of the peer meeting. He paid someone to contact Dorothy Schaefer's daughter, Emma said. She had been reading the communications for the past hour, and her voice had taken on the particular quality of someone who has been holding something very tightly for a very long time. Someone called Angela Schaefer 3 days after her mother died and told her that the medication irregularities suggested negligence, that the family had grounds for a complaint. She set the page down. Angela held my hand in the hallway. She thanked me. And 3 days later, someone called her while she was still in the middle of her grief and told her to be angry at me. He used her grief, Nico said. He used everyone's grief. Emma looked at the table. Mrs. Schaefer, Angela, my mother, everyone around me as levers. She paused. I want to call Angela Schaefer. Both men looked at her. Not yet, Adrian said. She deserves to know. She deserves to know the truth. She'll get it. But if you call her before we have this locked down, Harrington's people will know we have the communications, and they will move to contain it. He held her gaze. 48 hours. That's what we need. Emma held his gaze. She wanted to argue. It could see the particular tension of someone whose instinct is to act immediately in the direction of what's right and who is being asked to pause. He understood that instinct. He had spent years learning to override it with strategy. 48 hours, she said. Yes. A beat. Then you'd better make them count, she said. Middag. At 4 in the afternoon, Nico took the documents to a contact at the State Attorney General's office. Not through the front door, not through any official channel that could be monitored, but through the particular side door of trust that Adrian's organization had built with certain individuals over certain years for exactly this kind of situation. The contact's name was Sarah Okafor. She had been an assistant DA for 6 years before moving to the AG's office, and she had a reputation for being aggressively unimpressed by powerful men and aggressively committed to financial crime prosecution. Nico had met her 3 times over the years in contexts that were complicated and mutually beneficial, and he had assessed her in the way he assessed everyone as someone whose self-interest aligned reliably with the public good. He gave her the documents. He gave her the terminal metadata from the hospital records. He gave her a summary of Emma Whitmore's situation that was precise and complete, and left out only the parts that connected back to Adrian specifically. He came back at 6 and reported that Sarah Okafor had read the first 12 pages without looking up, and then had looked up and said in exactly the words Nico reported. "Tell me everything and don't leave anything out." Emma, sitting at the kitchen table when Nico came back, felt something loosen slightly in her chest. Not relief. Too early for relief. But the first hint of structural support, the feeling of something solid beginning to take shape beneath the ground she was standing on. "She'll move fast?" Emma asked. "She'll move carefully," Nico said, "which is better. Careful takes time. Careful takes less time than fast and wrong." He looked at her. "She's done this before. She knows how to build a case that Harrington's lawyers can't pick apart in a day." Emma nodded. She picked up her coffee cup, found it empty, and got up to make more. It was a small domestic action, and the fact that she was making coffee in a kitchen that did not belong to her in a life she was temporarily inhabiting, while her real life was being dismantled and rebuilt, was not lost on her. "I need to tell you something," Adrian said from the doorway. She looked up. He had been on the phone for the past 2 hours. She had heard his voice occasionally through the wall of the room where he worked. Low, controlled, authoritative, the voice of someone making things happen in ways she could not see and was choosing to trust. "Okay," she said. He came in and sat down, not across from her this time, at the end of the table slightly closer, an adjustment so small she almost did not register it, and she registered almost everything. "Victor Harrington was at the pier last night," he said. She stopped moving. "He was there," Adrian said. "Not on the pier, in a car nearby. One of my people confirmed it an hour ago." "He watched," Emma said. "Yes." She set the coffee pot down. She breathed. "He wanted to see it," she said, not a question. She was working through what that meant, what it said about the man she was dealing with, how it changed the picture. He needed to be present. This wasn't just business to him. No. This was personal. She looked at Adrian. "Why is it personal? What did my mother do to him beyond beat him at a planning board meeting?" Adrian was quiet for a moment. "That's what I've been trying to understand," he said. "Harrington has been in development for 35 years. He has faced setbacks before. He doesn't usually respond to them this way." He paused. "I think there's something older here. Something that predates the Dorchester project. Something between him and my mother." "Yes." Emma sat down. She thought about Margaret Whitmore, 61 years old, who had started the Beaumont Street Clinic the year after Emma's father died, who had worked double shifts as a hospital nurse to pay rent while she built the clinic on weekends, who had treated every patient who came through the door, regardless of ability to pay, for 22 years, who had turned away every developer and every offer and every argument that the land was worth more than the work being done on it. "I need to talk to her," Emma said. "I know. I've been protecting her from this, keeping her away from it. But she may know something I don't." She looked at him. "Something about Harrington. Something that explains why this became what it became instead of just a business dispute. If you call her, I'll be careful. I won't tell her where I am." She paused. "She's my mother, Adrian. She may be the missing piece. And I'm done making decisions about what she can and can't handle." He looked at her. "Use the secure line," he said. Margaret Whitmore answered on the second ring, which meant she had been waiting near the phone, which meant she knew something was wrong, which confirmed everything Emma already understood about her mother. "Emma!" The relief in her voice was enormous and immediate and barely controlled. "I'm safe, Mom. I know you're safe. Daniel called me last night when he got your text. He told me you checked in by midnight." A pause that contained approximately 47 separate worries compressed into 3 seconds. "Where are you?" "Somewhere safe. I can't tell you more than that yet." Emma. "Mom, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me, even if you think the answer is going to worry me." Silence. "All right," Margaret said. "Victor Harrington. You know that name?" The silence this time was different. Not the silence of thinking. The silence of something recognized. "Where did you hear that name?" Margaret said. Emma felt her pulse change. "He's behind what's happening to me," Emma said. "He's the one who set this up, who paid to have my credentials forged and my name destroyed." She kept her voice steady. "The Dorchester development. He wants your building. You beat him at the planning board 18 months ago, and after that he came after me." Another silence. "Oh, God," Margaret said, very quietly. "Mom, I should have told you. I should have told you years ago when I first started getting the offers." Margaret's voice had changed. It had the quality of someone releasing something they had been carrying for a very long time. "I knew who was behind the offers, Emma. I found out 8 months into it. A real estate attorney I know ran the companies and found the common thread. It was Harrington. You knew. I knew, and I decided not to tell you because I didn't want you worrying about something I thought I had handled. I went to the planning board. I made the case. I thought it was over. It wasn't over. No." A breath. "No, it wasn't." A pause. "Emma, there's something I need to tell you. Something I haven't told anyone in a very long time." Emma looked at Adrian, who was sitting across the table and not pretending not to listen. "Tell me," Emma said. "Victor Harrington and I have history. Not recent history, old history, before you were born." Margaret's voice was careful and measured in the way it became when she was approaching something she had thought about too many times to be careless with. "I was a nursing student. I was 22 years old, working in a free clinic in Roxbury during my training. Your father and I weren't together yet. This was the year before we met." A pause. "Victor Harrington came into that clinic one night, not as a patient, as the brother of a patient. His younger brother had been hurt. Street fight, we thought at first. But it wasn't. It was worse than that, and the details don't matter now. What matters is that we treated his brother, and I was the nurse, and I saw things that night about how Victor Harrington treated the people around him that I have never forgotten." "What kind of things?" "The kind of things you recognize in a person that tell you who they are when they think no one important is watching." Margaret's voice was steady. "He was cruel to the clinic staff. He was dismissive of anyone he considered beneath him. But what I remember most is that when his brother was stable and the danger had passed, he turned to me in the corridor and told me that I was going to sign a form indicating that his brother's injuries were from a fall." Emma was very still. "He wanted you to falsify a record," she said. "Yes. And you refused. I told him that I would document the injuries accurately, and that if he had concerns about how that documentation would be used, he should speak to an attorney." A pause. "He looked at me for a long time. He was 28 years old. He had already inherited his first money. He had the look of a person who was not accustomed to hearing the word no from someone whose social position he considered inferior to his own." Margaret paused. "He said, 'You'll regret this.' I told him that I very much doubted that and went back to my patient." Silence. "He remembered," Emma said. "I think so. I don't know whether he recognized my name when he started the Dorchester project, or whether it was the planning board testimony, or whether he had always known who I was and had been waiting for an opportunity that made sense." Margaret's voice was quiet. Victor Harrington is the kind of man who keeps lists, Emma. Lists of people who refused him. I made that list in a Roxbury clinic when I was 22 years old. Emma looked at Adrian. His face had gone very still. Something had shifted in it, a change she could not name precisely, a quality she had not seen there before in the time she had known him, which was less than 24 hours, but felt in the way of extreme circumstances considerably longer. "Mom," Emma said, "you did the right thing. In that clinic. Everything you've done since." "I know I did." Margaret's voice was firm. "I knew it then, and I know it now. The only thing I regret is not telling you sooner." A pause. "Are you really safe?" "I'm with someone who's helping me." "Who?" Emma looked at Adrian. "Someone who jumped into the river after me," she said. A long pause. "I want to meet that person someday," Margaret said. "I think you might," Emma said. Baited. She ended the call and sat with the phone in her hands and did not say anything for a moment. Adrian waited. 35 years, Emma said. He waited 35 years to settle a grudge with a nurse who refused to falsify a record. "That's not what he waited for," Adrian said. "He waited for leverage. Your mother had nothing he wanted for 35 years. When the Dorchester Project created a situation where her decision was costing him significant money, the old grudge gave him permission to make it personal instead of just strategic." He paused. "Men like Harrington don't forget. They file things. They wait until the filing becomes useful." Emma looked at him. "Your voice changed," she said. "When I was on the phone, something changed." He was quiet. "What is it?" she said. He looked at her for a long moment. "Your mother ran a clinic in Roxbury," he said. "Yes. Not just in the story she told you, before, when you were a child. She started in Roxbury. We moved to Dorchester when I was 5. The clinic moved with her." Emma paused. "She's been running community health clinics since before I was born practically, her whole career. Beaumont Street in Dorchester," he said. "But before that, she was in Roxbury." "Yes. Why?" Adrian stood up. He walked to the window and stood with his back to her for a moment, which was the first time she had seen him turn away from a conversation, and the quality of it, the deliberateness of the movement, like someone buying himself a few seconds, made her pay very close attention. "Adrian." Her voice was quiet. He turned back. "There was a clinic in Roxbury," he said. 30 years ago. I would have been 17. I had been in the city for 8 months. I came from Providence, not from a good situation, not from any situation that I want to describe in detail right now. I was living rough. Not on the street, not entirely, but close enough that the distinction didn't matter much." He paused. "I came into that clinic on a Tuesday in December. Not because I was hurt, because I had not eaten in 3 days, and I had a fever that I had been ignoring for a week, because I didn't have anywhere to go where ignoring it was optional." Emma did not move. "The nurse who treated me," he said, "was young. 22, 23. She had dark hair. She treated me like I was a person, which was not the universal experience at that point in my life." He paused. "She gave me food from the back room, which I don't think she was supposed to do. She sat with me while the fever came down. She asked me questions, not intrusive questions, not social worker questions, just questions. About where I was from, about what I liked, about what I wanted to do with my life, which was a question nobody had asked me in so long. I had almost forgotten it was a question with an answer." He stopped. "I went back 3 more times that winter. She never made me feel like I was a problem to be managed. She made me feel like I was worth something." Emma felt the room change around her. She felt it the way you feel a shift in air pressure, not something you see, but something your body registers before your mind does. "She never told me her name," Adrian said. "I didn't ask. I was 17 and stupid and more afraid of connection than of anything else in my life at that point. And then spring came, and I didn't go back." He looked at Emma directly. "I don't know if the nurse I'm describing is your mother. I don't know if the clinic in Roxbury 30 years ago was hers." But your mother is the right age, and she ran community clinics in Roxbury. And the description of how she treated Victor Harrington's brother, like I would document the injuries accurately, and then go back to her patient, sounds like someone who does the same thing regardless of who is in the room. Emma was completely still. You think she's the same person, she said. I think she might be. He held her gaze. I think that the nurse who sat with me when I was 17 and asked me what I wanted to do with my life, maybe the same woman who testified in front of the planning board 18 months ago about 400 families who needed a clinic. And I think that if that's true, then the reason I was on that pier last night is not entirely about Drummond and his maneuvering. Emma felt something move through her that was too large and too complicated to name immediately. She was not a person who believed in coincidence as a governing principle of the universe, and yet she was sitting in a room with a man who had pulled her from a river the night before, being told that the thing that had brought him to that river might trace back 30 years to a Tuesday in December in a Roxbury clinic where her mother had been a 22-year-old nursing student who gave food to a hungry teenager because he needed it. She saved you, Emma said. She was kind to me, Adrian said. At a point in my life when kindness had become so rare that I had stopped expecting it, which might be the same thing depending on the context. Emma looked at the table. She looked at the documents that connected Victor Harrington's money to the destruction of her career. She thought about her mother at 22 refusing to falsify a record for a man who had looked at her like she was beneath him. She thought about her mother at 23, or however old she had been that Tuesday in December, giving food to a boy who hadn't eaten in 3 days, and asking him what he wanted to do with his life. She has always been exactly who she is, Emma said. Yes, Adrian said. That's what I think. Emma looked up. She would want to know, she said. If you're right, she would want to know you turned out all right. Something moved across his face. Quick and unguarded, gone almost before it arrived, but Emma was paying attention. I'm not sure all right is the most accurate description, he said. You jumped into a river, Emma said. For a stranger, without thinking. She looked at him. Whatever else is true about you, that's also true. People don't do that from nowhere. That comes from somewhere. He said nothing. She let the silence stand. At 8 o'clock that evening, Adrian's phone rang. He answered it, listened for 40 seconds without speaking, and then said 2 words, how long, and listened for another 30 seconds, and said, understood, and ended the call. He looked at Emma. Harrington knows you survived, he said. He knew by this morning, but I've had confirmation that he now knows you didn't go to the police immediately, and that you have been out of sight for the past 20 hours. He is not someone who waits comfortably when a situation is not resolved. He's going to move, Emma said. He's already moving. My contact says there was a meeting this afternoon at Harrington's office. His legal team and 3 people from his communications firm. They're building a counter-narrative. Adrian paused. They're going to go after your mother. Emma stood up. They're going to claim the clinic has been operating without proper licensing compliance. Fabricated complaints about health code violations. They're going to make the argument that Margaret Whitmore is an unstable person who raised an unstable daughter, and that the entire situation is the result of a family with a history of... He stopped. Say it, Emma said. Mental illness, erratic behavior. They're going to use the river against you. They're going to say you jumped. Emma stood very still. The anger she felt was cold and very clean. The kind of anger that comes not from being hurt, but from watching someone decide to hurt someone you love. They are not going to touch my mother, she said. Her voice was completely flat. No, Adrian said. They are not. What do? We don't wait for Okafor to build the case on her timeline. We give her what she needs to move tonight. He looked at Emma. And there's one more thing. Harrington's communications firm has a contact inside Boston General, someone on the administrative staff who has been feeding them information throughout this process, including the fact that you accessed the record system this morning. Catherine Marsh stepped aside, Emma said. She didn't warn them. Someone else did. Who? We don't know yet, But if they know you accessed the terminal data, they know what you have, and they're going to try to discredit it before Okafor can use it. He paused. We need the original terminal. Physical access to the machine with a forensic record. Digital copies of metadata can be challenged. The physical machine cannot. Emma understood immediately. We need to get back into Boston General, she said. Tonight. They'll have revoked my credentials by now. When Catherine Marsh reported that I was in the building this morning, they would have, your credentials? Yes. Adrian looked at Nico. But not everyone's. Nico looked up from his laptop. Patricia Ewan, Emma said. Nico nodded. She believes you, Adrian said. You told me that this morning. She said it to your face. He paused. Is she someone who acts on what she believes? Emma thought about Patricia Ewan. 19 years at Boston General. The expression on her face when she had said, I believe you, not the expression of someone offering comfort, but the expression of someone making a decision. Yes, Emma said, she is. Can you get her on the phone? Emma picked up her phone. She dialed from memory. Patricia Ewan answered on the third ring, and before she could say anything, Emma said, Patricia, I need one thing from you, and I need you to trust me completely. A pause. Emma, Patricia said, tell me what you need. They got into the hospital at 10:15 through the service entrance on the east side. Patricia Ewan's badge, opening the door. Patricia Ewan walking beside Emma with the expression of someone who has decided something and is not going to undecide it. Emma had explained enough. Not everything. Enough. Patricia had listened without interrupting, which was the quality of a very good nurse, and also of a person who knows how to take in difficult information without making it about themselves. The terminal in the administrative wing, Patricia said as they moved through the hospital. I need a forensic copy of the hard drive, the metadata showing the login that was used to create the fraudulent withdrawal records. The physical machine as evidence. I can get you into the administrative wing, Patricia said. I have a colleague who, she stopped. Someone in IT security who owes me a significant favor. Call it in, Emma said. Patricia was already on her phone. They moved through the hospital the way Emma had always moved through it purposefully, without hesitation, with the air of people who belonged wherever they were going. Emma did not look at the nurse's station where she had spent 6 years. She did not look at the ward where she had stood at Dorothy Schaefer's bedside. She kept her eyes forward and her pace steady and told herself she could feel whatever she needed to feel about all of it later. The IT security contact was a man named Jerome, who met them in the hallway outside the administrative wing with the expression of someone operating significantly outside his comfort zone, but committed to it. Patricia said this is about a wrongful termination situation, Jerome said. It's about evidence of fraud, Emma said. The terminal in the executive compliance suite was used to create forged medical records under my credentials. I need a forensic image of the drive, documented, chain of custody intact. If I do this without authorization, if you don't do this and those records are used to end an innocent person's career and potentially result in a criminal prosecution, you will have had the ability to prevent it and chosen not to. Emma looked at him. I'm not telling you there's no risk. There's risk. But there's also a reason you became good at what you do, and I think that reason is not compatible with looking away from this. Jerome looked at her. He looked at Patricia. 40 minutes, he said. That's all I can give you. That's all I need, Emma said. They had the forensic image at 11:10. Jerome had worked with fast, quiet efficiency, the kind of efficiency that comes from actually being very good at something when the situation demands it. And he had created a documented chain of custody record that would satisfy evidentiary standards in a court of law. Emma walked out of Boston General at 11:23 with the forensic copy in her pocket and Patricia Ewan beside her, and she stopped on the sidewalk outside and breathed the cold air for a moment. Thank you, she said to Patricia. Don't thank me yet, Patricia said. Thank me when it's over." A pause. "Emma, the whole floor believed in you. The whole floor. Whatever you heard from compliance, whatever they said to the press, the people who worked with you knew." Emma felt something break open very slightly in her chest. She had been holding that shut all day. "I know," she said. "I know they did." "So did I," Patricia said. "I just said it too quietly and too late, and I'm sorry for that." Emma looked at her. "You stepped aside today," Emma said. "In the documentation room. That wasn't quiet." Patricia nodded once. Then she went back inside. Emma called Adrian. "We have it," she said. "I know. Nico's been monitoring the building." A pause. "Are you all right?" She was standing outside the hospital where she had worked for 6 years, with evidence in her pocket that could bring down the man who had tried to drown her, having just been told by a colleague that an entire floor of nurses had believed in her while the institution destroyed her. "No," she said honestly. "Not entirely." "Come back," he said. "We send everything to Okafor tonight. All of it. And then we wait for her to move." "And if Harrington moves first, then we have a problem," Adrian said. "But we deal with that problem when it arrives. Tonight we've done what we can do. Come back." She started walking. 2 blocks from the hospital, a car pulled up alongside her. She tensed. The window came down. It was not Harrington's men. It was Nico, who had apparently been following her progress from approximately half a block away for the past hour, which she had not noticed, and which told her something about exactly how tired she was. "Get in," he said. "It's cold." She got in. They sent everything to Sarah Okafor at 12:40 in the morning. The Drummond documents, the terminal metadata, the forensic drive image with Jerome's chain of custody record, a timeline Emma had written by hand, connecting every event in the conspiracy to the documented payments and communications from Harrington Capital. Okafor responded at 1:15 with 3 words, "I'm moving tonight." Emma read the message. She put the phone down. She sat in the kitchen of the safe house in the South End, with cold coffee and a notebook full of her own handwriting, and the particular feeling of someone who has done everything they can do for tonight, and now has to live inside the waiting. Adrian came and sat across from her. He did not say anything. She did not say anything. They sat in the quiet kitchen while the city moved outside, and Sarah Okafor somewhere across the city was doing what good prosecutors do when they have what they need. And Victor Harrington, somewhere across the city, was building a counter-narrative he was not going to get to use. And Margaret Whitmore on Beaumont Street was asleep or close to it in the apartment above the clinic she had run for 22 years. "She asked me what I wanted to do with my life," Adrian said. Not loudly, almost to himself. "What did you tell her?" Emma asked. "I don't remember exactly. Something about not wanting to be invisible anymore." He paused. "She told me that nobody who was really paying attention was invisible, that the problem was most people weren't paying attention." He looked at Emma. "She said, so pay attention first. Start there." Emma sat with that for a moment. "That sounds exactly like her," she said. "I know," he said. "She's going to want to hear that," Emma said. "When this is over, she's going to want to know you remember that." He was quiet. "Maybe," he said, "when it's over." Emma picked up the coffee cup. She looked at the table and all the things that were in motion that neither of them could control anymore. She paid attention to a boy in a clinic and told him to pay attention first, Emma said. And 30 years later, that boy jumped into a river after her daughter. She set the cup down. "That's not nothing, Adrian." He looked at her. "No," he said. "It's not nothing." Outside, the city was very quiet. Inside, 2 people sat with the complicated weight of everything that was in motion and waited for the morning to come. Sarah Okafor did not sleep that night. Emma learned this later, not from Okafor herself, but from the shape of what happened in the hours between 1 in the morning and 6, from the sequence of events that could only have been set in motion by someone who had read the documents and immediately understood what they were holding and had not paused once to consider whether this was the kind of case that required caution about powerful men. It was not that kind of case. Okafor had seen that in the first 20 pages, and Sarah Okafor was not that kind of prosecutor. At 2 in the morning, she contacted a federal colleague at the Boston field office of the FBI who had been building a parallel investigation into Harrington Capital's development practices for 14 months without enough to move. At 3, the forensic drive image was being analyzed by a federal technician. At 4, 2 agents were outside the home of the compliance consultant named Reeves with a warrant that had been signed by a federal magistrate at 3:47. Emma did not know any of this while it was happening. She had fallen asleep on the couch in the safe house living room sometime after 2, sitting upright with her notebook in her lap, and had woken at 5:40 to find that someone she did not ask who but the blanket over her shoulders was the same one Nico had produced from the car 2 nights ago had covered her while she slept. She sat up. The kitchen light was on. Adrian was at the table with coffee and his phone, and when she appeared in the doorway, he looked up with the particular expression of someone who has been awake for a while and has already processed the first several events of the morning. "Tell me," she said. He set the phone on the table. "Reeves was taken in for questioning at 4 this morning," he said. "Federal agents, not local." He paused. "He started cooperating within the hour." Emma stood very still. "How do you know that?" "I know things," he said, not evasively, simply, the way someone states a fact about how the world works that doesn't require more explanation than that. She sat down. "What did he give them?" "Everything from what I understand. The communications, the instruction chain, the names of the people inside Boston General who assisted with the record manipulation." He paused. "And the name of the man at Harrington's communications firm who called Angela Schaefer." Emma's hands came together on the table. "He flipped," she said. "He was always going to flip," Adrian said. "Men like Reeves are hired specifically because they're willing to do things that are difficult to trace back. The problem with that category of person is that their primary commitment is to their own survival. Harrington paid him to take risk. The moment the risk arrived, the calculation changed." "Harrington trusted someone whose loyalty was transactional," Emma said. "Powerful people often do. They confuse fear with loyalty, and fear only holds as long as the person doing the fearing believes they have more to lose from silence than from talking." He looked at her. "Reeves decided very quickly last night which side of that calculation he was on." Emma was quiet for a moment. She was thinking about what it meant, not with triumph, not yet, but with the careful attention she gave to all information before she decided what to do with it. "He's going to need protection," she said. Adrian looked at her. "Reeves. If he's cooperating with federal investigators and Harrington finds out before they've moved, Okafor knows that. Does she have the resources to—" "Emma." His voice was quiet. "She knows." Emma sat back. She was not accustomed to relinquishing control of situations, and she understood in the analytical part of her mind that this was one of those moments where her role was to trust other people's competence in their domain the way she expected people to trust hers. Okafor knew how to protect a witness. That was not Emma's department. She picked up the coffee cup. "My mother," she said. "Nico checked the building at midnight and at 4. She's safe. She's going to hear something this morning, on the news from someone. I need to call her before she does." "Wait until we know more about the timeline." "Adrian?" 30 minutes, he said. "Give Okafor 30 minutes to tell us what's moving before we put Margaret in the middle of it." Emma held his gaze. He was right. She knew he was right. It did not make the waiting easier, but it made it rational. 30 minutes, she said. The 30 minutes became 45, and then the phone rang. It was not Okafor. It was Nico, who had been somewhere in the city, doing things Emma had learned not to ask about in specific terms, and his voice had the tight-clipped quality it took on when something significant had happened that required immediate processing. "Harrington's attorney filed a preemptive motion at 6 this morning," Nico said. Civil action against Emma Whitmore, Margaret Whitmore, and one unidentified third party for defamation and interference with business operations. Adrian said nothing. Emma said, "He knows. He found out about Reeves at approximately 5:30. His attorney was at the courthouse when it opened." Nico paused. The civil suit is a diversion. It's designed to create a public narrative before the federal action becomes public. If his attorney can get the defamation claim into the news cycle first, it frames the entire situation as a dispute rather than a criminal investigation. He's trying to get ahead of the story, Emma said. Yes, which means we need the story to break first. She looked at Adrian. If the federal investigation becomes public before his civil suit gets traction, the narrative is already set. The sequence matters. It matters enormously, Adrian said. Who controls the sequence right now? Okafor. Emma was already on her feet. Call her, she said. Tell her what just happened. She needs to know he's moving in the civil arena. Adrian was already dialing. Okafor picked up on the first ring, which meant she had also been awake since some time before too, and when Adrian told her about the civil filing, she said 4 words, "I expected that, yes," with the tone of someone who had planned for exactly this and was already several steps ahead of it. The federal action goes public at 9, she said. I've been in contact with the U.S. Attorney's Office since 3 this morning. Harrington is going to be served at his home. A pause. The civil suit will be vacated before noon. The media. Adrian started. I've got a press briefing at 8:45, before the networks pick up the civil filing. Another pause. Tell Emma Whitmore I need her present, not as a witness yet, as a face. The story needs a face, and it needs to be hers. Adrian looked at Emma. Emma had heard. I'll be there, she said. Conned. She called her mother at 7:15. Margaret Whitmore answered on the first ring, same as always, same as forever. Something's happening, Emma said. Something good, I think. But it's going to be loud, and I need you to hear it from me first. Her mother was quiet for exactly 3 seconds, the Margaret Whitmore version of a sharp intake of breath. Tell me, she said. Emma told her. Not everything. The shape of it, the federal investigation, Reeves cooperating, the documents that connected Harrington's money to the destruction of Emma's career, the press briefing at 8:45. Another silence. Victor Harrington, Margaret said. Her voice was something Emma had never quite heard from her before. Not anger, not fear. Something older and more settled than either. The voice of someone who has been proved right about something they have known for a very long time, and find no satisfaction in it whatsoever. He's going down, Mom. Because of what he did to you. Because of what he did. To me, to the Schaefer family, to the people he's done this to before us. Emma paused. And because some people helped. Who? Emma looked at Adrian across the table. He was looking at his phone, or pretending to. I'll tell you everything when I see you, Emma said. After this morning. Can you stay in the building until I come? I've been in this building every morning for 22 years, Margaret said. I'm not leaving it today. Good, Emma said. I'll be there by noon. She ended the call. She looked at Adrian. She's all right, she said. She's Margaret Whitmore, he said without looking up from his phone. I expect she's considerably better than all right. Emma noticed the way he said her mother's name, not like a stranger's name, not like a name he had heard recently, like a name he had carried for a long time without quite knowing what to do with it. She did not say anything about it. She went to get ready for 8:45. The press briefing was at the Attorney General's office on Beacon Street, in a room that Emma had never been in before, and that had the particular impersonal formality of spaces designed for serious announcements. She arrived at 8:30 with Adrian's car dropping her 2 blocks away, which was his concession to the optics of the situation, and she walked in alone and found Sarah Okafor already there. Okafor was 51 years old, compact, and had the kind of concentrated authority that does not come from a title, but from a person's relationship with their own certainty. She looked at Emma when Emma walked in and said without preamble, "How are you holding up?" "I'm functional," Emma said. "Good. That's what I need you to be." Okafor looked at her directly. "In about 15 minutes I'm going to stand at that podium and describe a conspiracy involving the deliberate falsification of medical records, the corruption of a hospital compliance process, the manipulation of a grieving family, and the attempted murder of a licensed nurse." She paused. "You don't have to say anything today. I just need you standing next to me when I say it." "Can you do that?" "Yes," Emma said. "You're going to be photographed. The story is going to be significant, and it's going to move fast, and your name is going to be attached to it in a way that you will not be able to control after today." "My name has been attached to a story I couldn't control for the past 2 days," Emma said. "At least this one is true." Okafor looked at her for a beat. "I like you," she said, "simply the way you state facts." "I like you too," Emma said. "Can I ask you something?" "Yes. The Schaefer family, Angela Schaefer. She's going to find out today what was done to her, who called her, what they told her, and why." Emma paused. "Is there someone who can be with her when that happens? She lost her mother 2 weeks ago, and she's about to find out she was manipulated in her grief. She shouldn't find that out from a news broadcast." Okafor was quiet for a moment. "I'll make a call," she said. "Thank you. Is there anything else you need before this starts?" Emma thought about it. "No," she said. "Let's do this." The press briefing lasted 22 minutes. Emma stood slightly to Okafor's right and slightly behind her present, but not center visible, but not performing. And she kept her hands still and her face steady, and she thought about Dorothy Schaefer's breathing at the end. How peaceful it had been, how right it had felt to have been the nurse in that room. And she held that thought like a weight that kept her anchored while everything moved around her. Okafor spoke with the calm precision of someone who had prepared for this moment and also believed in it, which was a combination Emma recognized from the best doctors. She had worked with technical mastery and genuine investment, both at once. The room was very quiet while she spoke. When she said the words, "The evidence establishes a pattern of deliberate and coordinated criminal activity directed against Emma Whitmore, a licensed registered nurse with an unblemished record of patient care." Emma heard a camera shutter go off approximately 15 times in 2 seconds. When Okafor said federal agents served Victor Harrington at his residence at 7:45 this morning, the room broke into the particular noise of journalists reaching simultaneously for their phones. Okafor answered 6 questions. Clear, measured, complete answers that gave the room what it needed and nothing more. Then she stepped back, and the story was out in the world, and there was nothing Victor Harrington or his attorneys or his communications firm could do to put it back. Emma's phone began ringing before she got out of the building. Patricia Ewan, Daniel Cho. 3 numbers she didn't recognize. A Boston Globe reporter whose name she recognized from the byline on the story that had destroyed her 2 days ago, now calling for comment from the other direction. She did not answer any of them. She sent one text to Daniel. "I'm okay. Tell the floor. I'll be in touch." She sent one text to Patricia. "Thank you. For everything." She put the phone in her pocket and walked out onto Beacon Street into the November morning and stood there for a moment in the cold air and breathed. Her phone buzzed. She looked at it. It was a text from a number she did not have saved, and the text said, "I've been watching the news. You should know that whatever I calculated about that pier, I did not calculate the river. I am sorry for that. Drummond." She looked at it for a long time. Then she typed back, "I know. Thank you for the documents." She put the phone away. Adrian was across the street. He had been there since she walked in. She was certain of it, in the way she was beginning to be certain of things about him that she had not decided ahead of time to notice. She crossed the street. He looked at her face. "It's done," he said. "It started," she said. "That's different from done. There are going to be lawyers and hearings and depositions and a criminal trial that takes months. My license review is going to take time even with the evidence. The hospital is going to have to investigate internally, and that investigation is going to be uncomfortable for a lot of people." She paused. "But the story is out. The true story. Harrington can't put it back." "No," he said. "He can't." The civil suit. "Withdrawn at 9:12, Adrian said. "I just heard." Emma let out a breath that she had been holding, she realized, since approximately 6 o'clock this morning. "Okay," she said. "Are you all right?" She considered the question with the honesty she always gave it when he asked. "I'm the kind of not all right that comes after being very afraid for a long time, and then having the thing you were afraid of start to resolve," she said. "It's not a bad feeling. It just doesn't feel the way I expected relief to feel." "What did you expect?" "Something cleaner." She looked at the street. "I thought when this broke open, it would feel like justice. And it does partly, but it mostly just feels like exhaustion, and something I can't name yet." "That's because it isn't over," Adrian said. "Justice isn't a moment, it's a process. The moment is just when the process becomes visible." She looked at him. "That's surprisingly precise," she said. "I've been on both sides of processes like this," he said. Not with shame, not with pride. With the same directness she had come to expect from him. "I know what they look like from both angles." Emma looked at him for a moment. "I need to go to the clinic," she said. "My mother is waiting." "I know." A pause. "Come with me," she said. He went very still. "Emma. She's going to find out who helped me. She's going to ask. I don't want to navigate around the answer." She held his gaze. "Come with me." "I'm not—" He stopped, started over. "What I am is not something that belongs in your mother's clinic." "What you are is the person who jumped into the river," Emma said. "That's what I'm introducing. The rest of it she can decide what to do with." A long pause. He looked at her with the expression of someone who has calculated and recalculated and arrived at the conclusion that some things cannot be resolved by calculation. "All right," he said. The Beaumont Street Clinic was open. Of course it was open. Emma had not expected anything different. It was a Tuesday morning, and the waiting room had 7 people in it when they walked in, and the woman at the front desk, Rosa, who had been Margaret's receptionist for 11 years, looked up and saw Emma, and came around the desk so fast she nearly knocked over her chair. "Emma." She said it the way people say a name when they've been worried about it. "We've been watching the news. Everyone's been—" "I'm okay, Rosa." Emma held her hands for a moment. "Is she in back?" "Where else would she be?" Emma went through the door behind the front desk. Adrian followed. Margaret Whitmore was in the small office at the back of the clinic, standing at a filing cabinet, which Emma recognized as her mother's version of what Emma did with a cold cup of coffee, something to do with her hands, while her mind processed things she hadn't finished processing yet. She turned when the door opened. She saw Emma. She crossed the room in 4 steps and took Emma's face in both hands, and looked at her the way mothers look at their children when they have been very afraid and the fear has just resolved. Not with tears, not immediately, but with the complete and consuming attention of someone taking inventory of something precious. "You're all right," she said. "I'm all right," Emma said. Margaret held her face for another moment. Then she looked past Emma and saw Adrian. She went still. Not with alarm, with something else. Something that moved through her face quickly and was gone before Emma could read it entirely. "Mom," Emma said. "This is Adrian. He's the one who—" "I know who he is," Margaret said. Emma stopped. Adrian stopped. Margaret Whitmore looked at Adrian Voss across the small room with the expression of someone looking at something they have wondered about for a very long time. "You came back," she said, quietly. Not to Emma. To him. Adrian was completely still. "You remember," he said. "December," Margaret said. "You had a fever. You hadn't eaten." She paused. "I gave you vegetable soup from the back room, and you ate the whole thing without looking up." Something moved across her face, not quite a smile, but the ancestor of one. "You had a bruise on your left jaw that you said was from a door." "It wasn't from a door," Adrian said. "I know it wasn't." She looked at him for another moment. "I wondered sometimes whether you were all right, whether whatever you were running from had caught you or not." "Sometimes it caught me," he said, "but not completely." Not completely. Margaret looked at him for a long, quiet moment. Then she said, "Thank you for my daughter." Adrian said nothing. Emma watched his face and saw something she had only glimpsed before in the safe house kitchen in the dark, that quick, unguarded movement behind his eyes, the thing that was not quite at home, in a face that spent most of its time controlled and certain. "She didn't need much help," he said. "She was already swimming when I got there." "That's Emma," Margaret said. "She's been swimming against the current since she was 9 years old." She looked at her daughter. "Come and sit down, both of you. I want to hear all of it." Third, they sat in the back office of the clinic for an hour. Margaret listened the way she had always listened, completely without interrupting, taking everything in and processing it in the same way. Emma processed things, which was the first time Emma had ever seen that particular quality reflected in someone else, and understood where she had gotten it. When Emma finished, Margaret was quiet for a long moment. "He was in the room," she said finally. "At the planning board. Victor Harrington. He sat 3 rows back and he watched me testify and he said nothing." She paused. "I felt him watching me. I thought it was because I was winning the argument. I didn't understand it was something older." "You couldn't have known," Emma said. "I should have been more careful. You testified about 400 families who needed a clinic. That is not something you should have been more careful about." Margaret looked at her. "No," she said. "I suppose it isn't." A pause. "What happens now?" "There's going to be a trial, a federal case. It'll take time." Emma paused. "My license review will be fast once the AG's office sends the evidence to the licensing board. Patricia Ewan is already working on the internal process at the hospital." She paused. "I'll be back on the floor. Not immediately, but soon." "And the clinic?" "The clinic is fine, Mom. Harrington is facing federal charges. His development projects are going to be tied up in litigation for years. Nobody is buying this building." Margaret nodded slowly. Then she looked at Adrian. "You run a difficult operation," she said. "Not an accusation. A statement." "Yes," he said. "Does Emma know the full scope of it?" "She knows enough to have made her own assessment," he said. Margaret looked at Emma. Emma met her mother's gaze. "I know what I know," Emma said, "and I know what he did." Margaret was quiet for a moment. "The boy who came into my clinic in December," she said to Adrian, "told me he didn't want to be invisible anymore. I told him to pay attention first." She looked at him steadily. "Are you paying attention?" Something shifted in his face. "More than I was," he said. "That's a start," Margaret said. They left the clinic at noon. On the sidewalk outside, Emma stopped and stood for a moment with her face tipped up slightly, not looking at anything in particular, just standing in the air. Adrian stood beside her. "She's remarkable," he said. "She's my mother," Emma said. "I'm not always objective about her. I'm not talking about her professionally. I mean her." He paused. "She looked at me and she didn't flinch. She knew exactly who I am. She's lived in this city long enough to know exactly who I am, and she looked at me and she asked whether I was paying attention." He paused. "Nobody has asked me that in about 30 years. "She asked you that when you were 17. "Yes. "And you've been paying attention ever since," Emma said. "In your own way, to your own things. Not always the right things." "No," Emma agreed. "But you know the difference between the right things and the wrong things. I can tell that about you." She looked at him. "That's not nothing either." He was quiet. "What do you need now?" he said. Today. Emma thought about it. I need to call Angela Schaefer, she said. I need to hear her voice and know she's been told the truth. I need to call Daniel. I need to eat something, probably, since I can't entirely remember when I last did that. She paused. And then I think I need to sleep for about 12 hours. All of that is manageable, he said. I know. She looked at him. What do you need? He seemed slightly surprised by the question, which told her that it was not a question he was asked often. I need to handle several things I have been neglecting for the past 48 hours, he said. And I need to decide what I'm going to do about Costello. The intermediary who had arranged the meeting near the pier. The man who had put Adrian in position to be at the river. He was working for Drummond, Emma said. Almost certainly. So he put you in position to save me? Yes. Then whatever you're going to do about him, Emma said, take that into account. He looked at her. You're advising me on how to manage my people now, he said. I'm suggesting you consider the full context before you decide something. She held his gaze. That's not advice. That's just how I think problems should be approached. He looked at her for a long moment. Then he said, I'll take it into consideration. Good. Her phone buzzed. She looked at it. It was a text from a Boston General number she did not recognize, and the text said, This is Catherine Marsh. I spoke to the licensing board this morning. I told them everything I know. I should have done this 2 days ago. I'm sorry. Emma stood with the phone in her hand. She thought about Catherine Marsh in the doorway of the documentation room, stepping aside. She typed back, Thank you for doing it now. She put the phone away. Marsh, Adrian said. She's talking to the licensing board. Emma started walking. People do the right thing eventually. Sometimes they just need the situation to make it clear what the right thing is. You're more generous than most people would be in your position. I'm practical, Emma said. Anger takes energy I don't have right now, and she stepped aside when it mattered. I'll take that. She paused. Also, she believed me. She told me she believed me on the first day. She just didn't act on it fast enough. Emma looked at the street. People freeze. When the situation is difficult and the risk is high, people freeze. I've seen it in the emergency department 100 times. It's not a character failure. It's a human response. She paused. What matters is whether they unfreeze. He said nothing for a moment. Then, you're going to go back to nursing. Of course I am. After everything that happened, after what the institution did. The institution failed me, Emma said. Some people in it also failed me, but Patricia didn't. Daniel didn't. And even the ones who froze, they unfroze. She paused. The patients didn't do anything to me. 400 families depend on community health care in this city. I'm not walking away from that because a corrupt board member and a compliance consultant decided my career was a useful tool. She looked at him. I became a nurse because it was the right thing to be. That doesn't change because someone tried to use it against me. Adrian walked beside her in silence for half a block. What you just said, he said. Which part? The part about becoming what you are, because it was the right thing to be. A pause. I've been thinking about what that means. For a few years now. What it would mean to dismantle the parts of what I've built that I know are wrong. He paused. Not all of it. I'm not interested in pretending I can become someone other than who I am. But some of it. Emma looked at him. Is this related to the river? She said. It's related to the question your mother asked me 30 years ago, he said. And the fact that I still don't have an answer, I'm entirely proud of. A pause. It's also related to the past 48 hours, to what I've watched you do. What have you watched me do? Not stop, he said, under conditions that would have stopped most people. You didn't collapse, you didn't bargain, you didn't look for an easier version of the situation. You just kept moving toward what was true. He paused. I've built my life on a different set of operating principles. I'm not saying they're entirely wrong, but I'm saying that watching yours in action for 2 days has been—" He stopped. "Has been what a clarifying," he said, "about certain things." She looked at him for a moment. "Then that's good," she said. "Clarity is good." She stopped walking. They were standing outside a small diner on a street that smelled like coffee and November air, and she could see through the window that it was warm inside, and she realized she was profoundly bone-deep hungry and had been for hours. "I need to eat," she said. "Yes," he said. "Come in," she said. It was not a question. He held the door and tugged. They sat in a booth near the window and ordered coffee and food from a waitress who did not know who either of them was. Which was Emma, thought one of the things she had taken for granted before 2 days ago and did not intend to take for granted again. Anonymous warmth. A cup of coffee in a diner. Someone bringing you food without a context attached. She ate quickly because she had been a nurse long enough that eating quickly was a reflex. Adrian ate like someone who had learned to be efficient about things that other people treated as leisure, which told her something about him she already knew but confirmed. Halfway through the meal, her phone rang. The caller ID said Angela Schaefer. Emma looked at it. She looked at Adrian. He nodded. She answered. "Angela," she said. A long pause on the line. And then a voice strained rough with something that was either crying or the aftermath of it. "Miss Whitmore." Angela Schaefer's voice. I don't know how to start this call." "You don't have to start it any particular way," Emma said. "Someone from the AG's office called me this morning. They told me about the man who called me. After my mother." A breath. "They told me what he said to me was that it wasn't true. That it was designed to—" She stopped. "I told them things about you. I signed a complaint." "I know," Emma said. "I believed them. I was so angry and I was so sad and I believed them." "Angela." Emma's voice was steady and warm and entirely without accusation. "You lost your mother. Someone called you while you were in the middle of that and told you a story that felt like it made sense of your grief. That's not a failure of your judgment. That's someone weaponizing the worst moment of your life." She paused. "Your mother was not afraid at the end. I need you to know that. Whatever you were told, whatever you believed for a few days, that part was true. She was comfortable, and she was not afraid." A long silence. Then the sound of someone crying properly without trying to contain it. Emma sat with it. She did not rush to fill the silence. She knew how to sit with grief, had sat with it 100 times in hospital corridors and patient rooms, and she let Angela Schaefer have the moment she needed. "Thank you," Angela finally said, "for saying that." "It's true," Emma said. "I don't say things because they're comforting. I say them because they're true." "I know," Angela said. "My mother told me that about you." She said, a pause. She said the nurse who took care of her was the kind of person who tells you the real thing even when it's hard. Emma closed her eyes for 1 second. "She was right," she said. "Yes," Angela said. "She usually was." After the call ended, Emma sat with the phone on the table and her hands wrapped around the coffee cup and said nothing for a while. Adrian did not fill the silence. That was something she appreciated about him. He did not fill silences. He seemed to understand the way certain people understand without being taught that some moments required space rather than words. "She forgave me," Emma said. "Before I had the chance to tell her there was nothing to forgive." "Because there wasn't," Adrian said. "She signed a complaint against me. Under conditions designed specifically to produce exactly that result. She was a tool they used, not a choice she made." He paused. "Same as you were almost a tool for Drummond. Same as Reeves was a tool for Harrington. The difference between the tool and the person using it is who has the information and the power." Emma looked at him. "That's more philosophical than I expected from you this early in the day," she said. Something moved across his face that was close enough to a smile that she counted it. "I have my moments," he said. Emma sat with the coffee and the diner noise and the ordinary warmth of a Tuesday in November. "It's going to take time," she said. Not sadly, just accurately. The trial, the license, getting back on the floor. All of it is going to take time. She looked at the window. I'm not good at time. I'm good at doing. Then find the things you can do while you wait, he said. The foundation, she said. He raised an eyebrow. I've been thinking about it since last night, she said. Medical workers who are wrongly accused. The process for disputing falsified records. The institutional structures that make it easy to destroy someone's credibility without adequate protection. She paused. There's no good advocacy organization for that. I looked a few years ago after something happened to a colleague. There's nothing comprehensive. She looked at him. I can build that. While I'm waiting for the license review while the trial is moving forward, I can build something that didn't exist before. He looked at her. You were thrown into a river 48 hours ago, he said. I know. I was there. She looked at him steadily. And I survived it. That's not something you survive and then go back to exactly what you were doing. Something happened, and I want to use what happened for something. She paused. Does that make sense to you? Yes, he said. Not immediately. After a moment of actually considering it. That makes sense to me. Then stop looking at me like I'm moving too fast. I'm looking at you like I'm trying to keep up, he said. Emma picked up the coffee cup. She looked at the street outside at Boston, going about its Tuesday business at the city she had lived in for 6 years, and had almost been erased from 2 nights ago. She was not erased. She was sitting in a diner with a complicated man who had been kind to by her mother 30 years ago, and had carried that kindness somewhere inside him through every hard year since, and she had survived the river and found the evidence, and told the truth, and called the grieving daughter of a patient she had loved, and told her the real thing. She was not erased. She was still here. And she had a great deal left to do. The trial date was set for March. That gave Emma 4 months, which was not enough time, and also more time than she knew what to do with. Which was a combination she had never dealt with well. She was a person built for urgency. She functioned in crisis the way certain engines function under load better cleaner more efficiently than at idle. 4 months of waiting for a courtroom to do what courtrooms did was the kind of challenge that had nothing to do with courage and everything to do with patience, which had always been her weakest quality. She channeled it the only way she knew how. She worked. The foundation she had described to Adrian over diner coffee on a Tuesday morning existed 7 weeks later as a registered non-profit entity with a name, the Whitmore Medical Advocacy Foundation, which she had tried to name something else twice, before her mother had pointed out, with characteristic directness, that Emma's name was the name people would trust in office space borrowed from a colleague's law firm in Cambridge. 2 volunteer attorneys, a part-time administrator named Grace, who had previously run operations for a healthcare union, and who organized things with the systematic efficiency of someone who had always known that good intentions needed infrastructure to become real, and a website that Daniel Cho had built on weekends. Because he was, as it turned out, quietly excellent at web design, in addition to being an excellent nurse. The first call they received was from a pharmacist in Cincinnati who had been accused of medication diversion and suspended pending investigation, the evidence against him assembled from falsified dispensing records. The second was from a physician's assistant in Atlanta. The third was from a nurse in Portland, Oregon, 43 years old, 17 years of practice, whose license had been suspended following an accusation that her colleagues, the ones who had worked beside her who knew her, described as not just improbable, but structurally impossible, given the documentation timeline. Emma talked to all 3 of them personally. She sat at the borrowed desk in the Cambridge office, and she listened to them the way she listened to patients completely without filling the silences, without rushing toward the reassurance before she had gathered enough information to make it meaningful. She asked precise questions. She took precise notes. She told them what she knew and what she did not know and what the process looked like from the inside, because she had been inside it and she understood it now, the way you only understand something you have survived. Grace sat in on the call with the Portland nurse and afterward looked at Emma across the desk and said, "You're going to need a full-time staff of at least 6 within a year, Probably more. I know, Emma said. Where's the funding coming from? I'm working on it. You have 3 weeks of operating costs left. I know that too. Emma capped her pen. I'm working on it. The funding conversation happened on a Thursday evening in December in a restaurant that was warm and not too quiet, and had the kind of menu that indicated someone had made decisions about what mattered and committed to them fully, which was a quality Emma had come to associate with places worth being. She sat across from Adrian and put a folder on the table before the food arrived. He looked at the folder. He looked at her. This is a funding proposal, he said. It's a funding proposal, she confirmed. For the foundation. I'm meeting with 3 institutional donors this week, and I have a grant application pending with 2 foundations that fund healthcare advocacy work. And I have a speaking engagement at a medical conference in February that will generate some visibility. She paused. And I am asking you, Emma, I'm asking you as a potential donor, not as... She paused. Not as whatever else you are to me right now, which I haven't entirely categorized. She held his gaze. The foundation is legitimate. The work is real. I'm not asking you to launder anything or attach your name to anything. I'm asking whether you want to put resources toward something that matters. He looked at the folder. He had not touched it. Open it, she said. He opened it. He read it the way he read everything quickly, completely, with the focused attention of someone who did not need to read things twice. She watched his face while he read, and found, as she usually found, that it did not give her as much information as she would have liked. He had an exceptional poker face, which she found simultaneously frustrating and impressive. He closed the folder. The operational model is sound, he said. I know. The legal framework is clean. My volunteer attorneys are excellent. The projected caseload in year 1 is conservative. I'd rather under-promise and adjust than promise too much and fail the people who are counting on us. He looked at her. What you're building, he said, is going to make it harder for institutions to do what Boston General did to you. That's the point. It's going to make it harder for people like Victor Harrington to use medical systems as tools. Also the point. He was quiet for a moment. I'll fund the first year of operations, he said. Full operating costs. No conditions attached, no naming rights, no board seat, no involvement in decisions. Emma looked at him. Why no conditions? She said. She was not suspicious. She was precise. She wanted to understand the reasoning. Because the foundation's independence is the foundation's value, he said. The moment it has strings attached to it, it becomes something other than what you intend it to be. He paused. And because I know what your mother's clinic meant to families who had nowhere else to go. I know that in a specific way. He looked at her steadily. This is the same thing. I want it to exist without owing me anything. Emma sat with that for a moment. She felt something she had been keeping very carefully at arm's length, the full weight of everything he had done and the reasons he had done it settle into its actual shape. She had been managing it, holding it at the careful distance of someone who has learned to process one thing at a time and had a great deal to process in the weeks since the river. Thank you, she said. Don't thank me. Use it well. I will. The food arrived. They ate. They talked about things that were not the foundation and not the trial and not Victor Harrington. They talked about the city, about things they had read about a disagreement Emma had with something Adrian had said 3 weeks ago that she had been thinking about since and had decided he was wrong, about which she told him directly and which he disputed with enough precision that she had to substantially refine her position by the end of the conversation. It was, she realized the first evening in weeks, that had felt like something other than recovery. It felt like building. The trial began on a Monday in March, when Boston was still cold, but showing the first signs of deciding to be otherwise, the particular late winter light that promises more than it delivers, but promises sincerely. Emma sat in the gallery with her mother on her left, and Daniel Cho on her right, and Patricia Ewan 2 rows back, and she watched Sarah Okafor stand before a federal jury and begin to tell the story that Emma had lived from the inside. Hearing it from the outside was a different experience. She had known all the facts. She had gathered most of them herself, but hearing Okafor's voice lay them out in sequence: the conspiracy timeline, the payments, the forged records, the pier, the river. Emma felt something she had not expected to feel in a courtroom. She felt witnessed, not vindicated. That was a different thing, and it would come later. This was something that arrived before vindication, the moment when the private truth of what had happened to you became public record, when the story that had lived only in your body and your notebook and the minds of the people who believed you became a thing the world was being asked to hear. Her mother reached over and took her hand. Emma held it. She did not cry, not because she was suppressing it. She had done enough suppressing of things in the past months to know that this was not that, but because what she was feeling was not the kind of feeling that comes out as tears. It was larger than that and quieter than that, and it sat in her chest like something that had been waiting a long time to arrive at the right place. Reeves testified on the third day. He was a precise man who had, in the months since his arrest and cooperation agreement, developed the particular quality of someone who has decided that accuracy is now their most reliable protection. He answered every question Okafor asked with complete specificity. He described the instruction chain from Harrington to his consulting firm to the compliance operation inside Boston General. He described the payment structure. He described the specific conversation in which Victor Harrington had told him that Emma Whitmore needed to be removed from the equation entirely, and then had paused and clarified, professionally. Her career needs to end. The clarification, Reeves said, had not addressed the pier, because by the time the pier was arranged, it had stopped being Reeves's operation. Harrington had taken over that part himself. That testimony delivered in the flat, careful voice of a man reading from a prepared statement he had memorized because it was true, and he had decided that true was what he was going to be, was the moment Emma felt the last of something release in her chest. Not the anger. The anger had been gone for weeks, burned through in the work of building the foundation and talking to the Portland nurse and the Cincinnati pharmacist, and the others who had called since each one, a reminder of what this kind of destruction felt like from the inside. What released was something older. The residue of the moment on the pier when she had understood she was going to die. The body's record of the cold water and the current and the fighting to stay at the surface. She had been carrying it without entirely knowing she was carrying it, the way you carry an old injury that only announces itself under specific conditions. It left her quietly in a federal courtroom on a Wednesday in March, while a cooperating witness described the chain of decisions that had led to someone pushing her off a pier. She breathed. Her mother tightened her hand. Victor Harrington took the stand on the seventh day. Emma had been advised not to come for his testimony. Okafor had suggested it gently, and then when Emma had looked at her with the specific expression she used when she had already made a decision, had accepted the situation with the pragmatism of a woman who had learned to allocate her energy efficiently. Harrington was 63 years old, and he carried himself with the particular posture of a man who had spent decades in rooms where he was the most powerful person present, and had come to experience that as a natural condition rather than a circumstance. Even in a federal courtroom facing charges that could result in significant prison time, he had the bearing of someone who expected the room to accommodate itself to him. He was precisely what Emma had understood him to be from Nico's research and Drummond's documents and the single name spoken on a pier in the dark, a man who confused the absence of consequences with innocence, who had arranged his life so carefully around insulation from accountability that he had stopped being able to imagine it arriving. He denied everything with the particular smoothness of someone who had rehearsed denial so many times it had become a reflex. He denied the instruction to Reeves. He denied the financial connection to the compliance operation. He denied knowledge of the pier. He said with visible conviction that Emma Whitmore had been the subject of a legitimate hospital compliance investigation, and that his role on the board had been entirely proper, and that he had no knowledge of any effort to harm her. Okafor cross-examined him for 4 hours. She did not raise her voice once. She did not need to. She had the wire transfers. She had the communications. She had the forensic terminal data that Jerome had documented with the chain of custody Patricia Ewan had witnessed. She had Reeves. She had the testimony of the hospital administrator who had been identified as Harrington's internal contact, and who had, in exchange for a cooperation agreement, described 3 separate conversations with Harrington's intermediaries about the progress of the case against Emma. She laid it all in front of Harrington piece by piece, and she asked him about each piece with the calm and complete attention of someone who already knows the answer to every question and is asking it on behalf of the record. Emma watched him respond. She watched the moment precise and almost invisible a shift in his eyes and the set of his mouth a quality of recognition when he understood that the room had stopped accommodating him. When he understood that all the insulation he had built and all the careful distance he had maintained between himself and the things he had ordered done had not been enough. She did not feel triumph when she saw that moment. She felt something quieter than triumph. She felt the particular feeling of something that should not have happened being accurately named. The verdict came on a Friday afternoon, 3 weeks into the trial. Emma was in the gallery with her mother and Daniel and Patricia. Same seats, same arrangement, and when the foreperson read the words "guilty on all counts," she heard her mother make a sound she had never heard from her before. Small and quick and not quite breath. The sound of something that has been held tightly for a long time being released. Emma put her arm around her mother's shoulders. Margaret leaned into her exactly once briefly, with the full weight of everything that had been carrying them both for months, and then straightened. Patricia was crying openly 2 rows back, which was the first time Emma had seen Patricia Ewan cry in 6 years, and she found it more moving than she expected. Daniel said quietly, "Yeah," and that was exactly the right word for the moment and exactly Daniel's way of finding the right word. Outside the courthouse, Okafor shook Emma's hand and said, "Now it's over." "The trial is over," Emma said. "Yes." "The work isn't." "No," Okafor said. "But that's true of anything worth doing." She looked at Emma. "What you've built in the past 4 months, the foundation I want to refer cases to you. Medical workers who come through our office who need the kind of advocacy you're doing." "Yes," Emma said. "Please." Okafor nodded. Then, she was gone back into the work that did not stop just because one verdict had been rendered, and Emma stood on the courthouse steps in the March cold, with the 3 people who had come through this with her, and let herself stand there for a moment, doing nothing at all. "What do you need?" Daniel said. "Coffee," Emma said. "And then probably a week." He laughed. It was such an ordinary sound. Daniel's laugh, easy and warm and belonging entirely to someone who was genuinely delighted by the small things that Emma felt it in her chest, like a reminder of what normal felt like. She had been away from normal for a while. She was beginning to understand that she was going to be allowed back in. She called Adrian from the courthouse steps. He picked up on the second ring, and before she said anything, he said, "I know, Nico's been monitoring." "Guilty on all counts," she said. A pause. "How do you feel?" he said. She thought about it. She always thought about it before she answered that question from him, because he always meant it precisely, and she had learned to answer it the same way. "Like something is finished," she said. "And like, I don't entirely know what to do with my hands now that it's finished." She paused. "And like I want to see my mother tonight and eat something she cooked and sit in her kitchen and not talk about any of this for a few hours." "Then do that," he said. "I will." A pause. "Thank you for everything, for the river and the safe house and Nico and the funding and Emma. I'm not done. I know, but you don't need to list it." She stopped. "No," she said. "I suppose I don't." A pause. "I want to ask you something." "Ask?" "The things you said in December, about the parts of your operation that you know are wrong, about dismantling them." She paused. "Is that still true?" A silence. "Yes," he said. "Is it happening?" "Slowly," he said. "These things move slowly when they're done correctly. There are people whose situations depend on the current structure, and those situations have to be managed carefully before the structure changes. There are also people who will not respond well to the change, and those situations require—" He paused. "A different kind of management." "But it's moving," she said. "It's moving." She stood on the courthouse steps in the March cold, and she felt for the first time in a long time the absence of the specific weight she had been carrying since the night the compliance officer had shown her the termination letter in a hospital break room at 4 in the morning. "Okay," she said. "Okay," he said. "I'll see you this week," she said. "Yes," he said. "You will." The licensing board reinstated Emma's nursing credentials on a Tuesday in April. It was not a dramatic event. There was no ceremony. A letter arrived from the Massachusetts Board of Registration in Nursing, official formal, and 3 paragraphs long, stating that the investigation into her conduct had been concluded, the evidence had been reviewed. The determination of the board was that no violation of nursing practice standards had occurred and that her license was fully restored with immediate effect. She read it twice at her kitchen table. Then she called her mother. "I'm back," she said. Her mother was quiet for 1 second. "You were always back," Margaret said. "This is just the paper catching up." Emma sat with that. "I'm going to go to the hospital," she said. "Today. I need to talk to the floor director. I need to understand the timeline for returning to active duty." She paused. "I need to walk back in." "You could give yourself a day," her mother said, not insisting. Offering. "I know," Emma said. "But I want to go today." Her mother understood. She always understood. She walked into Boston General at 2 in the afternoon. She went through the main entrance, not the staff entrance, not because she was making a statement. She was not a person who made statements, but because the main entrance was the most direct route to the administrative suite, and direct was how Emma moved when she had somewhere to go. She passed the lobby where she had spent years walking quickly between the elevator and the exit. She passed the corridor that led to the cardiac unit where Dorothy Schaefer had spent her last days. She did not stop. She kept walking. The floor director was a woman named Helen Bryce, who had started at Boston General 3 months before Emma's suspension, and had therefore not been present for the internal failures that had allowed the conspiracy to proceed as long as it had. She was competent and careful, and had in the month since Harrington's arrest been managing the hospital's internal reckoning with what its board and compliance office had allowed to happen. She stood up when Emma walked in. "Miss Whitmore," she said. "Emma," Emma said. "And I'd like to discuss my return to active duty." Helen Bryce sat back down and gestured to the chair across from her and said, "I've been expecting this call for a week." "I'm here in person," Emma said. "Yes," Helen said. "I see that." Something in her expression shifted. "How soon?" 2 weeks, Emma said. "I need to hand off several active foundation cases and brief my staff. 2 weeks from today." Helen nodded. "Your position on the cardiac unit is available," she said. "Patricia Ewan has been keeping it available." Emma felt something warm move through her chest. "I know," she said. "I'd like to speak with the floor about protocols that the Foundation has identified as creating vulnerability for false reporting. Some structural changes that would make it harder for what happened to me to happen to someone else." Helen looked at her. "You want to reform the compliance process," she said. "I want to make it better," Emma said. "Not because of what happened to me specifically, but because what happened to me exposed gaps that were always there. Those gaps affect patient safety as much as staff safety." She held Helen's gaze. "I'm not here to relitigate anything. I'm here because this is where I work, and I want it to be better." Helen was quiet for a moment. "The board approved a full compliance restructuring last month," she said. "The committee overseeing it has been looking for someone with—" She paused. "With the perspective you have." Emma looked at her. "Are you asking me to be on the committee?" "I'm asking if you'd consider it." Emma thought about it for approximately 4 seconds. Yes, she said, on the condition that the committee's recommendations are binding, not advisory. Helen smiled, briefly but genuinely. I think we can work with that, she said. 2 weeks later, she walked back onto the cardiac floor at 7 in the morning. She came in for the day shift, the way she had always come in, with coffee in her travel mug and her badge on her lanyard, and the particular mental adjustment she made every time she crossed from the outside world into the specific reality of a hospital floor, the shift in attention, the narrowing of focus, the readiness. She was halfway to the nurse's station when she heard it. Applause, not loud, not performative. The quiet, genuine kind. The sound of people who work with their hands expressing something they have not said in words, because words are not the primary language of people who spend their lives doing. Patricia Yuen was at the station with Daniel and 4 other nurses Emma had worked beside for years, and they were clapping, and Patricia's expression was the expression of someone who has waited a long time for something to be right and is watching it become right. Emma stopped. She was not accustomed to receiving this kind of thing. She gave things care, attention, precision, presence, and she had never been entirely comfortable being on the receiving end of the equivalent. She stood with it for a moment. She looked at the faces of the people she had worked with. I'm back, she said. We know, Daniel said. We've been waiting. Emma put her coffee mug down on the counter. She picked up the first chart. She went to work. The first patient she saw that morning was a 71-year-old man named Harold, who had been admitted overnight with irregular cardiac rhythm, and was when Emma came into his room, sitting up in bed and arguing with the monitoring equipment, as though it had personally offended him. It keeps beeping, he said by way of introduction. That's what it's supposed to do, Emma said. It beeped 6 times in the last hour. I'm going to review the readout, and we'll talk about what it's telling us. She looked at the monitor. She looked at him. How are you feeling? Annoyed, he said. Anything else? He considered. Scared, he said. More quietly. That's reasonable, she said. You're in a hospital and something is happening with your heart, and that's frightening. We're going to figure out what it's telling us and what to do about it. She looked at him directly. I'm going to take care of you. That's what I'm here for. He looked at her. You mean that? He said. Yes, she said. I always mean that. She stayed in his room for 12 minutes, which was longer than the minimum, but not longer than was needed, and she answered every question he had with the full and honest answers he deserved, and when she left he looked less afraid, not because the situation had changed, but because he had been told the truth about it by someone who was paying attention. She moved to the next patient, and the one after that. This was the work. This had always been the work. Not the foundation, not the trial, not the testimony and the evidence, and the complicated machinery of justice working its way through its necessary processes. Those things mattered, and she would continue to do them. But this, a room with a person in it who was afraid and needed someone who would tell them the real thing and stay for the questions, this was what she had been built for. She had known that since she was 9 years old. Nobody was going to take it from her. She went to the river in May. Not the pier was gone, demolished as part of a waterfront development review that had been accelerated when Harrington's projects in the area collapsed. But to the bank downstream, the concrete embankment where Adrian had pulled her out of the water on a November night that now felt in the strange way of extreme experiences both very recent and very long ago. She went in the evening after a day shift, still in her scrubs. She stood at the edge and looked at the water. The Charles in May was nothing like the Charles in November. It was light on the surface, moving steadily, and the air above it had the particular quality of a city river in spring, alive with sound, catching the last of the day's light entirely without malice. She stood there and felt the difference between then and now. The body remembered what the mind had processed. That was one of the things nobody told you about surviving something, that the body kept its own record independent of what you decided to think about what had happened, and the record was not always comfortable to stand in. She stood in it. She breathed. She heard footsteps behind her and did not turn, because she knew the sound of those footsteps now had learned them in a safe house kitchen and a Cambridge office and a hospital corridor and a diner booth and 100 small, ordinary moments that had accumulated into something she had not named yet and had decided not to rush toward naming. Adrian stood beside her. He did not say anything. She did not say anything. They stood at the river's edge for a while in the May evening. "I've been thinking about something you said," she said finally, not urgently, conversationally, the way you pick up a thread that has been waiting. "Which thing?" "The day at the diner. You said that watching me for 2 days had been clarifying about certain things." She looked at the water. "I've been thinking about what that means for me. Watching you." He was quiet. "And," he said, "you are a person who has done things that I would not do and cannot endorse," she said. "I knew that from the beginning, and I have not changed my assessment of it." She paused. "You are also a person who jumped into a freezing river without hesitating, who kept a kindness from a stranger in a clinic for 30 years, who funded a foundation with no conditions attached because you understood that conditions would change what it was." She looked at him. "You are both of those things at the same time, and I have been trying to figure out what to do with both of those things at the same time." "Have you figured it out?" he said. "Not completely," she said. "But I've figured out that the trying to figure it out is also something. That I want to keep trying to figure it out." She turned to look at him directly. "That's not a declaration. It's an honest statement of where I am." He looked at her. "I'll take honest over declarations," he said. "I know you will," she said. "That's part of why I said it that way." Something moved across his face, that quick, unguarded quality she had first seen in a safe house kitchen and had been seeing more frequently since, as if the months had gradually worn down the insulation between whatever was actually there and the surface he showed the world. "There are things I'm going to tell you," he said, "about the operation, about what's changing and what isn't, and what I'm asking the people around me to do differently. Things I should tell you before." He stopped. "Before we continue in whatever direction this is continuing." "I'd want to know those things," Emma said. "Some of them are going to be difficult." "I'm not looking for easy," she said. "I've never looked for easy." "No," he said. "I know that about you." She looked back at the river. "She asked you if you were paying attention," she said. "Your mother. Tonight, when I told her I was coming here, she said—" Emma paused. She said, "Tell that boy he turned out well enough." He was very still. She said, "Boy." She said she still thinks of you that way sometimes. The boy with the fever who ate the whole bowl of soup. Emma looked at him. She said it with complete affection. He was quiet for a long moment. Emma did not fill the silence. She had learned from him how to let silences do what they needed to do. "Tell her," he said, "that I'm still paying attention." "I will," Emma said. She looked at the river. She thought about the night it had taken her, the cold and the dark and the current that had wanted to keep her. She thought about fighting to the surface. She thought about a hand in the dark that she had swung at and nearly missed, and then held because she was smart enough to know when to stop fighting the thing that was trying to help her. She thought about everything that had come after. The documents and the terminal data and the diner and the diner booth and the Cambridge office and the patients on the cardiac floor and the 3 people from Cincinnati and Atlanta and Portland who had called a foundation that had not existed before the river and now existed because of it. She thought about her mother at 22, standing in a corridor refusing to sign a form for a man who looked at her like she was beneath him. She thought about what it meant to be the daughter of a woman like that, what it meant to carry that in you, what it meant to survive the thing that was supposed to erase you and come out the other side, not as a smaller version of yourself, but as exactly who you had always been more clearly than before. She breathed the May air. She turned away from the river. She started walking, and Adrian fell into step beside her. and the city opened around them, alive and complicated and full of people who were afraid of things and needed someone to tell them the real thing, full of patients and nurses and families in hospital corridors. And women who ran clinics in buildings they refused to sell, full of boys who carried kindnesses for 30 years, and men who jumped into rivers and prosecutors who moved at night and floor nurses who kept positions available because they knew who belonged in them. The river had tried to take her. It had not. Emma Whitmore walked out of the night it happened and built something from the wreckage and went back to the work and did not stop because stopping was not in her and had never been. And the world she walked back into was better for the fact that she had survived it. That was not a comfort, it was a fact. The same kind of fact she dealt in, always precise and unadorned and true. She had been thrown into the river because powerful people decided she should disappear. She had not disappeared. She had come back, and she had brought the truth with her, and she had made sure it mattered, and she was still here. That was not nothing. That was everything.